The Protector Chapter 751. One of the online celebrities, Sarah, even pointed the camera at Seth and his men before speaking to her online audience. Now let me show you this bunch of no good security guards who are trying to stop our live stream. What does everyone think I should do about them? The audience in the live broadcast immediately began to insult Seth and his men. They even threatened to expose them and their family online. Get lost. I'm telling you that you can't afford to interfere with my live stream, you. Got it, insulted Sarah before trying to walk away. Naturally, Seth could not oblige her, so he quickly got in front of the live streamers once again to stop them. In situations like that, Seth was very much like Levi, for he, too, could not tolerate them. We have two problems here. First, you're not allowed to live stream here, so please stop immediately. Second, you have to apologize for insulting us, insisted Seth determinedly. We will not apologize, and we will continue streaming. What are you going to do about it? Provoked Sarah with a cold sneer. Then, you'll have to excuse us for throwing you out of this building, warned Seth sternly. Hey, what's going on? Pierre and the others from the management team came over, with Zoe following close behind. These security guards are trying to stop our live stream. They even threatened to throw us out if we continue, complained Sarah in tears. Then, Pierre quickly turned to question Zoe. What is the meaning of this, Ms. Lopez? Are we not welcome? Don't worry. Let me handle this. After calling Seth and his men aside, Zoe asked them to be patient with their guests. Okay, Ms. Lopez. For Levi's sake, I'll be patient. Otherwise, I'd have definitely thrown them out, even if it costs me my job, agreed Seth while he tried to suppress his anger. Afterward, Zoe took Pierre and his party to visit the entertainment area of the Oriental Star Group. After the tour, Pierre sneered at what he had seen. This doesn't look like a place that can make good movies. I believe Helena's the only one holding this place together. Helena then quickly explained, oh no, I only played a small part in the success. Excellent quality is the real reason why our movie was a commercial success. Your company doesn't really seem to have what it takes to produce that level of quality, though. Did you guys resort to plagiarism? Continued Pierre. Careful now, Mr. Pierre, warned Zoe, who noticed the real reason why Star Entertainment came that day. They were not there to visit but to show how much more superior Star Entertainment was compared to Oriental Star Group. To Zoe, who was already annoyed, the accusation of plagiarism was the last straw. I was just kidding, Ms. Lopez, explained Pierre smiling before he boldly made Helena an offer. Have you ever considered joining us? Even though you're making good progress here with online movies, you should consider moving on to theatrical features. You're better off with us. The Protector Chapter 752. It seemed that Pierre was openly provoking Zoe, who decided to agree generously. Helena, that's an offer you should definitely consider. Do you see how understanding Ms. Lopez is, Helena? Come, join us, continued Pierre as he laughed at Zoe's response. Thank you for the offer, but I'll stay. Helena had sworn that she would stay at the Oriental Star Group unless Levi and Zoe asked her to leave. Then, you better not regret that decision, threatened Pierre in front of everyone. Seeing how arrogantly Pierre acted as a superior, Zoe could only imagine how humble Star Entertainment's stars and online celebrities could be. Obviously, the group from Star Entertainment did not come over to visit but to show off and challenge Oriental. After the tour, Pierre inconsiderately smoked a cigar in the reception room. There's something I have to tell you, Ms. Lopez. Go ahead. Zoe was starting to lose her patience with Pierre. I plan to acquire the entertainment department of your company. What do you think? Asked Pierre as he smoked his cigar, choking Zoe and making her cough. An acquisition? That's not going to happen. We're doing well, and we have no plans to sell the department, rejected Zoe, to which Pierre laughed in response. You don't understand. You have let it go because I'm the one making the acquisition, and I always get what I want. That was how overbearing Pierre was in the Southampton entertainment industry. It was common for him to make acquisitions and buy copyrights forcibly, which was why people in the industry feared him. Zoe then smiled in response, I'm afraid that I can't just let you have what I want to keep. If you reject me, Ms. Lopez, I promise you that your company will be finished. I'll make sure that you lose access to every possible resource in this industry, threatened Pierre boldly. You think I'm scared? I've seen worse. Zoe was determined not to let Pierre have his way. Very well. We'll see about that. Nobody gets far without my say-so. After issuing his final threat, Pierre got up and walked out of the building, leaving the executives of the Oriental Star Group worried. Do you know how many potential entertainment companies Star Entertainment has ruined over the years? We're in grave danger. Even though Zoe was just as aware of how powerful Star Entertainment was, she was not just about to give in to them that easily. At that moment, Levi came and inquired, where are the bunch of arrogant celebrities I've heard about? He got furious after Seth told him about them. They're clearly challenging me, and I will not tolerate that. The Protector Chapter 753. Forget it. They have left. There's no point to keep pursuing the matter anymore. Zoe shook her head discouragingly. She was fearful of exacerbating the situation. After all, there was nothing to be gained from that. They better pray hard that I don't get to lay my hands on him. I will make him meet his maker sooner, threatened Levi angrily. He would never let Zoe suffer. Ms. Lopez, Star Entertainment's actual objective in visiting South City is not to tour our office. Instead, they're going to film a variety show at the South City War Zone. Their initial plan was to film it at Southampton, but they were rejected. Yet, for some unknown reason, the South City War Zone permitted them. The secretary explained the matter. I see. So that's what happened. Zoe did not care much. Levi, on the other hand, was full of anger. With rage written all over his face, he lashed out, What are you talking about? They're going to shoot some variety shows in the South City War Zone. Yes, confirmed the secretary. This is ridiculous. Where did they get that courage from? How dare they do filming at the South City War Zone? Levi's face was a brewing thunderstorm. This made Zoe and the secretary feel that something was amiss. Why is he so angry? He spoke as if he was the chief of the South City War Zone. No way, we must not set a precedent for them. How can they just fool around at a military base? I won't agree to it, yelled Levi furiously. Why are you so agitated? Chided Zoe, mystified by his reaction. I just don't want to tolerate this kind of unruly insolence, retorted Levi as he left. Fuming. The secretary asked curiously, Ms. Lopez, what's wrong with Mr. Garrison? He acted as if he was an army officer. I guess he just not used to our way of handling things, answered Zoe. After Levi left them, he headed straight to the South City War Zone. He wanted to find out who was the one who authorized Star Entertainment to film a variety show in the middle of the South City War Zone. They are simply too foolhardy. Around this time, Star Entertainment had already arrived at the South City War Zone. The filming team, the logistics team, and the celebrities were all staying at the dormitory inside the war zone. The equipment team had finished setting up the systems needed and was waiting around for the variety show to start. Several online influencers like Sarah were still live streaming and filming the dormitory which the military base arranged for them. What's this? How can anyone sleep on this bunk bed? The floor of the dorm is all covered in mud. I dare not step on it. It's so dirty. And it's so humid and wet here. Realizing that they would be stuck here for the whole month to film their show, these influencers and celebrities could not stand the living condition. A string of complaints escaped their mouths. I can only see a bunch of stinky, smelly, sticky soldiers everywhere. I really can't stand it anymore. Sarah wrinkled her nose. Pierre was coolly smoking a cigar as he burst out laughing. Everyone just bear with it for a month. After filming this show, I guarantee that your popularity will skyrocket. Hearing Pierre's assurance, Sarah and the others started to relax. The Protector Chapter 754. Although the living and working conditions were tough, the shooting of the variety show in the barracks proceeded without a hitch. They endured, for they knew that they were doing something different, and the outcome should be great. Most importantly, they would make a lot of money. As they settled in slowly, they got used to the pace of life there. Seeking to further increase her popularity, Sarah queried, "Boss, can we broadcast live stream from the barracks? My fans want to see what the army dorms look like." Pierre puffed a cigar and replied, "It's up to you all. Let me tell you something. Since I'm the one who brought you all into this place to film a show, there's nothing I can't handle. You're amazing, boss. We admire you." Sarah and the others cheered. "It's nothing. After all, I have connections all over Arudaya. There's nothing I can't do," Pierre boasted as he gave his cigar the last puff before casually flicking the butt onto the grass. A small patch of the grass where his cigar butt fell was burnt. Following his permission, the internet influencers started their live streaming. With one influencer assigned per team, the whole production crew started roaming around the barracks and filming. "My dear fans, look. This is how a military base looks like. Here's the battle tank. And this is the army-trained dogs." Sarah's live streaming brought her to a phalanx of tanks. "Dear fans, behold, a tank." She sounded excited as she introduced the sight. "I'll jump onto the tank later and show you how it looks like." Sarah not only filmed the tank formation, but she was also daring enough to climb up and shoot the inside of the tank. "Excuse me, comrades. Filming is forbidden here. Please go back to where you came from." Immediately, one of the soldiers rushed to stop her. "Ugh, you smell bad. Do you even shower? You reek of sweat." Sarah furrowed her brows as she insulted the soldier. "Comrade, please return to where you come from. No form of shooting or recording is allowed here," repeated the soldier patiently. "Hey, do you know who I am? Don't you dare to obstruct me from doing my job." Sarah was starting to get annoyed. "Furthermore, we entered this base legally. Did you see anyone stopping us? Why do you have to be such a busybody? If your superiors blame you later, can you afford to shoulder the responsibility?" Sarah coldly replied. "Get out of my way quickly. I'll leave after I've done my broadcast. If you continue to hinder me, I'll make sure you face the repercussions." She insisted on barging in. "Comrade, please back off. This is top secret. Any photography and videography are strictly prohibited," insisted the sentry on duty. Humph! What is there to be secretive about? It's just a tank after all. Why are you acting like no one has seen it before? It's plastered all over the televisions. But no one said anything about it being top secret. With Pierre backing her up, Sarah had become arrogant and paid the sentry no heed. As an authorized civilian in the base, she felt herself to be out of the barracks jurisdiction. She just wanted to do her things without any restrictions. Those on TVs have explicit permissions. Currently, this area is off limits. You do not have clearance to film or take photos. The sentry insisted persistently. I demand you to get out of my sight immediately. If you try to stop me again, I promise I will report your conducts to your superiors. Your future and career will be ruined, Sarah threatened again. No means no. Unless you have received orders from our superiors, you're not allowed to film here. Sarah was completely furious. I don't believe you. I must finish my live stream today by hook or by crook. No one can stop me. She snidely added, especially a stinky soldier like you. Despite all the warnings, Sarah still insisted on barging in. Who are you calling stinky? At this moment, a fierce voice boomed. The Protector Chapter 755. Without her realizing, Levi had shown up out of nowhere. His booming voice shocked Sarah to the core. She spun around just in time to see a stern man staring at her. She glared back incredulously. Who are you? What are you doing here? Seeing Levi in his plain clothes, she became bolder. Since he's not a soldier here, he must be an average worker. Perhaps he belongs to the production crew. In that case, I shall give him an earful. Which team do you belong to? Is it the equipment team or the logistics group? How dare you try to control what I do? Do you have a death wish? Sarah challenged furiously. Hearing such a disrespectful tone, Levi became enraged. The moment he arrived at the barracks, all he saw were groups of influencers and teams of live streamers. By making his military base into such a public spectacle, Levi felt it was a great insult to the pride and discipline of the men and women who had pledged their lives to serve their country. That was something he absolutely abhorred. From the corner of his eyes, he spotted the famous influencer, Sarah, insisting on filming the tank. He immediately rushed over. This is prohibited. Isn't her action tantamount to leaking military secrets? If the model, structure, or even the schematics of these tanks were leaked out, they would be rendered useless. In addition, he heard the insult of stinky soldier. This disrespect statement completely angered him. If it weren't for us soldiers, protecting lives and sovereignty as well as keeping the peace. Can you even broadcast your live stream nonsense right now? Can you even live lavishly with sumptuous food and clothes? Levi stared at Sarah coldly and commanded, I want you to apologize to the guards immediately for those insults you've said. Seeing her adamance, he emphasized harshly, now. Immediately. The rest of the guards saw the furious expression on Levi's face. They did not want to imagine nor experience the depths of his wrath. Sarah was petrified by Levi's terrifying outburst, not knowing what to do. Who are you? What right do you have to impose on us? The production team next to Sarah was irked as they stared at him. I'm a soldier. A soldier who can't stand your behaviors. Levi retorted coldly. Since when does a stinky soldier like you have the authority to butt into our business? Sarah rebuked him arrogantly. In their eyes, Levi looked too young and was too casually dressed to be a military officer. He must be a mere private, at most a low-ranking soldier. A military officer was usually at least 34 years old. With that thought in mind, Sarah did not mince her words as she voiced her insult. Instead of flying into a rage, Levi smirked. Seems like you've offended me too. I demand an apology from you as well. Apologize to you? In your dreams. You've disrupted and delayed my live stream broadcast. You are the one who should be apologizing to me. She was irked by his smirk further, so she demanded, kneel and bow down to me immediately. Then, I'll consider forgiving your mistake. Not only did the production team refuse to apologize, but they also demanded an apology from Levi. This was something Levi did not expect, not even in his wildest dreams. There are actually arrogant people like them in the world? Moreover, this kind of arrogance was openly displayed in a military base. Such insolence! Do they think that they're the mightiest here? Do they think that rules no longer apply to them? If I were to apologize, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences. Levi grinned. Ha! Do you mean I can't handle an apology from a small fry? What a joke! Sarah snorted coldly. Without further ado, she haughtily urged, hurry up and apologize. I don't have so much time to waste on you. At that moment, she wanted so badly to slap him. The Protector Chapter 756. A glint of cold malice flashed from Levi's eyes as he kicked Sarah's legs. With a loud thud, she fell onto her knees in front of him. I'm willing to apologize, but only if you kneel and listen, Levi stated coldly. Sarah was dumbfounded. So was her production team. All the soldiers nearby secretly gave Levi a thumbs up upon witnessing such a scene. He is such a ruthless man. They had been instructed by the superiors not to cause trouble to these online celebrities. Therefore, despite all the disrespect they had received, these guards had no choice but to keep their chagrin at bay. However, right now, the person standing in front of them was on a totally different level. He had the guts to do whatever he wanted. Snapping out of their bewilderment, Sarah and her team were now in an uproar. You! What did you just do? You actually assaulted someone. Do you know who Sarah is? She is one of the top influencers in the country with a following of more than tens of millions of fans. You're just a lowly ranked soldier. How dare you lay a hand on her? Sarah's manager and crew started shouting angrily. Cut the crap and just kneel. Levi unleashed a few more kicks continuously. The kicks were swift and precise. And no one had any time to react. Thump. Thud. No one had the chance to defend themselves before falling to their knees as they were caught by surprise. Their knees and calves were as heavy as lead, and they could not stand up at all. As a result, they were all kneeling in front of Levi. Are you out of your mind? You have a death wish, hey? I, Sarah, swear that I will not let you off easily. I will utilize all the resources I have to make you suffer. Sarah was so enraged that she was shouting at the top of her lungs. The escalated confrontation caught the attention of even more people. Soon, the whole place was crammed with onlookers, including the other internet celebrities and their team. What are you doing? How dare you assault someone? Don't you know who we are? Now that you've raised your hand against someone, you'll have to bear the serious consequences. Voices of protest rang out louder and louder from the influencers and celebrities. When Sarah saw that her colleagues had arrived, she threw an even bigger tantrum. The whole place descended into a chaos. Come and see. These soldiers are beating up civilians. Come and be my witnesses. These stinky soldiers are assaulting civilians, shouted Sarah. Exaggeratingly. Smack. Just as she finished shouting, Levi gave her a slap on her face. Say that one more time, and I'll slap you once more, he threatened. You stinky soldier. Smack. She could barely finish the phrase as another slap landed on her cheek. Stink! You damned stinky soldier, smack! Even before she could finish uttering her insult, another heavy slap landed across her face. Try saying that again. Levi looked down icily upon her, his hand raised in preparation for another slap anytime. This time Sarah covered her face and sobbed softly. She dared not say anything anymore. Levi's overbearing ruthlessness shocked everyone. You stinky soldiers can't even handle any criticism, hey! A male celebrity stepped out to speak in Sarah's defense. Bam! With a well-aimed dropkick, the busybody was sent kneeling on the ground as well. You can only talk to me on your knees, Levi said coldly. Well, I want to see who dares to trouble my people. Pierre's voice bellowed from the midst of the crowd as he made his way through. The Protector Chapter 757. After seeing their pillar of support, Sarah and the rest relayed what happened to Pierre in an exaggerated manner. Sarah sobbed continuously, with the red marks left by Levi still printed on her cheek. When Pierre saw that, he became enraged. Who are you? How dare you hit my people? Yelled Pierre. Pierre! Which soldier is so foolish that he dares to offend my people? Who are you? Asked Levi. Listen up, then. I'm Pierre Javins, the CEO of Star Entertainment. We came to the South City War Zone to film a variety show, stated Pierre coldly. Who permitted you to film a show in the war zone? Don't you know that the military base is a sacred ground that cannot be infringed? Look at the mess you people have made in the military base, said Levi coldly. A laugh escaped Pierre's lips. Who gave me the permit? With my vast connections, it's a piece of cake to get a special permit to shoot in the war zone. Furthermore, I'm filming a show here to promote the soldiers. This is a positive and motivational show. Who are you to be such a huge busybody? Firstly, the military base is a sacred ground that must not be infringed. Outsiders are prohibited from entering. Secondly, why do the soldiers of Arudaya need you to promote them? Go overseas and ask around. Which country doesn't fear the soldiers of Arudaya? Stated Levi angrily. Thirdly, you are live streaming in the military base without any permission. Filming without any restraints is already an infringement of the rules. There's even someone who tried to film the internal structure of the tanks. This would constitute a huge crime of leaking military secrets. Lastly, your people have insulted soldiers. Just these 4 points will be sufficient to make you spend the rest of your life in jail. Levi listed out their crimes point by point. Yet, the military base is not a place for you to act brazenly. The other soldiers clapped and cheered as they were rather moved by the speech. After all, Sarah and the other celebrities had gone overboard. They had been suppressing their fury for a while because no one had shown up to back them up. Yet, Levi's powerful presence intimidated Sarah and the rest. They were so terrified that they stayed silent, not daring to utter a single word. On the other hand, Pierre was enraged. Who are you? How dare you question what we do? That's not for you to know. I'm asking you, who permitted you to film in the military base? Levi was curious about that. Listen up, you rascal. It's the head of culture and media department who gave me special permission. He's a good friend of mine, declared Pierre proudly. Bring him to me right away. If I don't see him within 10 minutes, I won't bother meeting him, ordered Levi coldly. Who's so arrogant to demand me to meet him? Does he have balls of steel? With a booming voice, Jensen Grant, head of culture and media department, arrived. Pierre relayed what happened to Jensen in an exaggerated manner. The Protector Chapter 758. How dare you? You actually assaulted someone? Tell me, which platoon do you belong to? Jensen was furious. You are in no position to ask me that, replied Levi frostily. See, Mr. Grant? Look at how horrible his attitude is. He was worse when you weren't around just now. He assaulted us directly. Pierre fanned the flames, trying to stir up his anger. Jensen seemed to be cross at his complaint. That's it. I don't care which platoon you're from. Since you hit someone, you must apologize to them, instructed Jensen furiously. We'll only accept your apology if you kneel, added Sarah and the others. However, Levi merely smirked. My stance remains the same. None of you can bear the consequences of my apology. Aren't you being too insolent, you rascal? We can't bear the consequences of your apology? Well, I'd like to try that out, rebuked Jensen furiously. Are you sure? Levi narrowed his eyes, a cold glint flashing within them. For some reason, Jensen felt himself quiver uncontrollably at Levi's glare. This rascal has such a powerful aura. I'm sure. Apologize right away, demanded Jensen. Let me ask you something first. Are you the one who permitted Star Entertainment to film in the military base? Levi's question took a sudden turn. Yeah, that's right. I permitted them, admitted Jensen defiantly. What's the objective? Asked Levi. Of course, it's to promote our army and let the public see the true conditions of a military base. I think that it's very meaningful, explained Jensen in a matter-of-fact tone. With a cold smirk playing on his lips, Levi said, I know that you're just trying to film a variety show, dragging the soldiers along to participate in this act. How insolent! You've severely disrupted the military base's conduct. Humph! What we're doing is to explore the military base in depth and understand the daily life of soldiers. It's not all that serious. But it is. Are you saying that you allow them to film the battle tanks and weapons? Are you saying that it's acceptable to leak military secrets? Levi abruptly asked. Hey! Taken aback, Jensen quickly clarified, of course, that's not allowed. I believe that the celebrities of Star Entertainment will know what to do. When Jensen said that, he could sense that the atmosphere took a strange turn. Pierre and the rest were lowering their heads silently. A flash of guilt and embarrassment even appeared on Sarah's and the other celebrities' faces. You guys didn't actually film it, right? Asked Jensen in astonishment. Mr. Grant, they're just curious. Even I'm curious, so I am sure these kiddos would be too. As expected of a man who had been around, Pierre immediately tried to diffuse the tension. Satisfied, Jensen nodded. Did you hear that, rascal? Everyone's just curious. They didn't do anything over the board. Hey! Really? Then look at the footages in their cameras, stated Levi angrily. The Protector Chapter 759. At that moment, Sarah and the rest became flustered. They had taken many photos and videos earlier, which included a large part of the military base. They knew that these were definitely classified as military secrets. Hence, if an investigation unfolded, the consequences would be really dire. However, the more restricted the content was, the more exciting it was to the audience, and the more publicity the show would reap. This was why they still chose to film and live-stream the military base. You rascal! You're deliberately making things difficult for me, right? Apologize right away. Otherwise, I'll throw you out, threatened Jensen. When Levi heard Jensen's threat, he chuckled. Fine. But if you want me to apologize, all of you must kneel. Frowning, Jensen bellowed furiously, "Who the F are you? How dare you be so arrogant? You're asking who I am? In that case, you might only get an answer from Mike Pence," said Levi with a smirk. "What? Mike Pence? How dare a mere private like you say the Commander-in-Chief's name?" This time, Jensen was completely enraged. "Ha! Why can't I call Mike Pence's name directly? Aren't names supposed to be called?" rebuked Levi. You're such a cocky bastard." Jensen's body shook in rage. Who in the South City war zone dares to call Mike Pence by his full name? Isn't he asking for it? "Mr. Grant, with him around, I think that our show cannot continue anymore. We've had no choice but to leave. I think that I've placed you in a tight spot today. After all, I didn't expect you to have so little authority in the military base," lamented Pierre deliberately, trying to stir up a conflict. Pierre refused instantly. "You don't need to go. With me backing you up, who dares to stop the shooting?" assured Jensen. An awkward expression appeared on Pierre's face. "Aren't we making things difficult for you? Look at the situation now." The more Pierre said that, the more enraged Pierre became. "Do my commands not throw any weight here? Hey!" Bellowing at the top of his lungs, Jensen glared at Levi viciously. The other soldiers were well aware that he was the head of Culture and Media Department. However, with a nonchalant smile playing on his lips, Levi said calmly, "Yet, your words are useless to me. You don't have the right to dictate what I do." The moment Levi uttered those words, Jensen flew into a rage. "Are you from the war zone? Why are you wearing casual clothes? Could it be that you're from Pierre's team?" yelled Jensen. "Mr. Grant, he's not from our team." "I don't know him," replied Pierre hurriedly. "So he's not from the war zone, hey? Someone, throw him out. If he resists, lock him up in the detention room for a week," cried Jensen. His subordinates rushed forward, trying to restrain Levi. Bang! At that moment, a gunshot reverberated in the air. The Protector Chapter 760. Everyone was shocked to the core as they trembled in fear. They looked around and tried to discover the source of that sound. "Who the F dares to touch him? This is outrageous!" A furious bellow rang across the compound. They saw Mortimer, captain of a troop, and a bunch of men sprint over. As Mortimer headed straight towards Levi, he instructed someone, "Inform the Commander-in-Chief and Captain Steele immediately." "What brought you here, Captain Lambert?" asked Jensen with a flattering smile. When he saw Mortimer, although he was a department head, he still worked a desk job. Hence, he did not have a lot of authority. Perhaps, he would be important in festive performance, but the military base was dominated by fists. The strongest person wielded the most power. "What are you doing?" bellowed Mortimer angrily. "Captain Lambert, he's not from the war zone. He snuck in from outside, trying to disrupt the shooting of Star Entertainment's variety show. However, I stopped him," explained Mortimer. However, when Mortimer heard him, his anger intensified. Since when did the military base become a circus for these clowns? "Captain Lambert, let's not talk about that first. I'm talking this troublemaker right now." Jensen changed the topic of conversation hurriedly. Actually, he was the only person who permitted Star Entertainment to film the variety show and gave them the authority to enter the military base. In reality, not many people were cognizant of this, including Mike Pence. He was hoping that before Mike Pence and the rest caught wind of what was happening, the variety show would have already ended. On the other hand, after receiving a call earlier, Pierre became even less fearful. He had just talked to the head of the Jones family from Southampton. The Jones family was one of the shareholders in Star Entertainments. Hence, they were aware that Star Entertainment came to film a show at the South City War Zone. The head of the family even informed Pierre that even the commander-in-chief of South City War Zone needed to treat the Jones family with due respect. His son, Anson, was one of the more prominent soldiers of the Iron Brigade. In fact, he was the god of war's most trusted aide. Hence, he assured Pierre that everything at the South City War Zone would go smoothly according to his wishes. After hanging up the call, a look of extreme delight crossed Pierre's face. His ego was now inflated beyond imagination. Initially, when he heard that Mortimer was a captain, he was still a bit worried. Now, he felt completely relieved. With the Joneses backing him up, there was nothing for him to fear. Answer my question directly. Who allowed these people to enter the military base? Asked Mortimer sternly, demanding an answer. Jensen felt very embarrassed. First, he was interrogated by Levi, and now by Mortimer again. This was a complete humiliation for him. When he noticed Pierre's disappointed gaze, Jensen became angry. Mortimer Lambert, you have no authority to interrogate me. I'm dealing with this man right now. Move aside. Ignoring Mortimer, Jensen insisted on throwing Levi out. Do you know who he is? Asked Mortimer with a cold smirk. I don't give a f. Someone, tie him up. Jensen was adamant on doing this, no matter what. The Protector Chapter 761. Clang. 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 Boom. 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 At the next moment, the ground started to tremble, as if there was a giant army rushing in their direction. Everyone glanced around in fear, only to see a huge troop of soldiers surrounding them. The soldiers' expression changed as they realized that this troop was the Dragon Legion from the Iron Brigade. I want to know who dares to touch the god of war, bellowed Alfie as he strode over. Boom. 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 The Dragon Legion arrived simultaneously, blocking all possible paths of escape. Sarah and the other influencers were shocked to their core by this intimidating scene. After all, they had never seen anything like that before. Pierre and Jensen exchanged a bewildered gaze as their expressions drastically changed. These men seemed to be coming for Levi. Leading the Iron Brigade, Alfie stopped in front of Levi. The entire troop surrounded Levi as they glared at Pierre and the rest menacingly. Who gave out the instruction to throw the god of war out? Alfie's ruthless glare swept across Pierre's and Jensen's faces. This is a misunderstanding, right? The god of war isn't here, blurted Jensen. There's no misunderstanding. You're the one who gave the command, right? Asked Alfie aggressively. Jensen was so scared that his resolve wavered. As he quivered, he glanced at Levi with suspicion in his eyes. Could it be that he has a special identity? Is he telling the truth when he said that no one can bear the consequences of his apology? He even dared to call Mike Pence by his full name. What kind of identity does he hold that he can do all that? Firstly, Mortimer, the captain, came. Then, even the Iron Brigade arrived to protect him. Who exactly is he? Jensen knew very well that the Iron Brigade was ranked so high in the war zone that not even Mike had the authority to deploy them at will. Yet, they were actually mobilized to protect a young man. This seems to imply something. At that thought, Jensen's forehead was already dotted with sweat, his body quivering. I might have just gotten myself into huge trouble. At that moment, Pierre saw the flag fluttering in the air. He asked, "Are you from the Iron Brigade?" "Yes, that's right." Alfie nodded. "What about it?" "Then, You should probably know Anson Jones, right? An arrogant expression crossed Pierre's face. Hey! Alfie was shocked to hear that name. The head of the Jones family just asked him about 2 days ago. Yes, replied Alfie honestly. However, Pierre interpreted his reply as an affirmation that Anson was an important personnel of the Iron Brigade. After all, he was so significant that anyone would know him. The Jones family has such strong connections, hey? Now, Pierre was confident that Alfie would kowtow to the Jones family. Good that you know. Anson is the god of war's most trusted aide, and the pride of the Joneses, declared Pierre with a smile. Levi interrupted him, wait a moment. The god of war's trusted aide? Why don't I know that? The Protector Chapter 762. Hey? Who are you to know Anson? What a joke! Pierre shot a disdainful glance at Levi. Anson is the right-hand man to the god of war. Naturally, an insignificant person. Like you won't know him. He's the god of war you're referring to, announced Alfie. What? A look of astonishment appeared on Pierre's and Jensen's face. The color had been completely drained from their faces. How is that possible? How can he be the god of war? I don't believe you. Naturally, Pierre was unwilling to face the reality. He's really the god of war. Sir, Captain Mortimer reports. Mortimer saluted him. Witnessing this scene, Pierre and Jensen felt like a bombshell had been dropped on them. They were utterly dumbfounded. If one person's account were unreliable, the second person would do the trick. Sir, Commander Pence reports. At that moment, a group of people rushed over. The person at the front was Mike Pence, the Commander-in-Chief of the South City War Zone, who saluted Levi. The deputy commanders and military officers behind him saluted Levi as well. This. Pierre and Jensen gasped in disbelief. They felt like their blood had frozen in their veins as shivers ran down their spines. If the verdict of 2 people was still unreliable, what about that of 3, 4 or 5 people? What if a dozen of them said that he was the god of war? In that case, he's indeed the god of war. The god of war? How can it be that he's the god of war? He's such a young man and so low profile. We have actually messed around with the god of war? This is the unluckiest thing to happen to them. They could have offended anyone else but the god of war. Not only were the 2 of them terrified, but Sarah and the rest, who were kneeling on the ground, also started sweating in fear. Their eyes widened in disbelief. The god of war? The stinky soldier we were referring to is actually the supreme god of war. Oh no! Sarah's manager moaned in shock and fainted right away. Staring at Mike, Levi asked, Mike Pence, what's going on? Why is the military base in such a mess, with a bunch of clowns filming here? Jensen's heart was pounding so frantically that it was almost leaping out of his throat. Indeed, he dared to call Mike Pence by his full name. Sir, it's my mistake. I'm completely oblivious to this. He whirled around to glare at Jensen. Is this your doing, Jensen Grant? No. No. I, stuttered Jensen, not knowing how to explain himself. That's enough. The shoot ends right now. Everyone from Star Entertainment just gets lost. The military base is not a place for you to unleash your madness, bellowed Mike furiously. Pierre was terrified. Now, his connections were completely useless in this situation, not even the Jones family. When he was up against the god of war, even the Joneses could offer no help at all. Levi's gaze suddenly landed on Sarah and the rest. Do you still need me to apologize? The Protector Chapter 763. Levi's question came like a bolt from the blue, causing Sarah and the rest to be struck by lightning. Their bodies were already drenched in cold sweat. He still remembers this? Initially, when Sarah insisted on demanding an apology from Levi, he claimed that no one could bear the consequences of his apology. He even had the audacity to say that everyone must kneel when listening to his apology. Back then, everyone scoffed disdainfully at his presumptuousness. Now, they all understood finally. Indeed, no one could bear the consequences of his apology. After all, he was the mighty god of war. Who would dare to force an apology out of him? Furthermore, he was not even in the wrong. Instead, he stood on the side of justice. You're the influencer, Sarah, right? Who do you think you are? How dare you insult me to be a stinky soldier? Asked Levi coldly. Pierre and the rest were at an utter loss for what to do, for their minds were in a complete mess. She actually dared to say something such absurd as calling the god of war a stinky soldier? She really must have a death wish. I'm a very fair person. I will neither accuse an innocent man, nor will I ever spare a sinner. Your evil deeds have been recorded in the cameras. Alfie, bring them to me, commanded Levi. Soon, Alfie confiscated all the equipment. After playing the footage, they discovered that the footage exposed all of the activities in the military base, including the secrets involving the battle tanks. If such footage were leaked, these people could be sentenced to death. Reviewing the pieces of evidence, Levi scoffed coldly, "What else do you have to say for yourselves? Do you still want me to apologize? We're sorry. We're terribly sorry." Sobbing, Sarah and the other celebrities started to beg and cry. Even Pierre was so terrified that he burst into tears. "You, apologize. Start live streaming now and apologize," instructed Levi as he pointed at Sarah. Sarah followed his instructions. She started a live stream and apologized to the few soldiers she insulted as stinky soldiers. When Sarah was about to apologize to Levi, Alfie stopped her. "Get lost. You're not worthy to apologize to the god of war. Here's your punishment. Star Entertainment will cease all operations for 3 months. All employees must undergo a mandatory etiquette program, and they can only continue working after they've passed it. As for all these people, round them up and teach them a proper lesson. Also, apologize to Zoe Lopez from the Oriental Star Group." No one dared to disobey Levi's commands. However, if Star Entertainment put all activities on hold for 3 months, they would lose a third of their current profit. However, Pierre dare not disobey Levi's order. In the end, all these celebrities and production teams were chased out of the military base. After the shareholders of Star Entertainment caught wind of this incident, they all called to ask about it. The Joneses were one of them. In fact, Michael personally called to ask, "Pierre, what's going on? Why did you suddenly terminate such a heavily invested project? If we incur a loss, are you going to compensate?" The Joneses actually invested in this show. "Mr. Jones, you may not know this, but we've been kicked out of the military base," lamented Pierre helplessly. "Didn't you mention my name?" The Protector Chapter 764. "I did. Not only did I mention your name, but I also even brought up Anson's name. Then, I got chased out." Pierre was overcome with worry. "Having offended the god of war, I'm doomed. What'll happen to me in the future?" "What? It didn't work even after you mentioned mine and Anson's name? Were you mistaken? How dare Mike disrespect the Jones family?" exclaimed Michael furiously. "Mr. Jones, you don't know this, but the god of war came today. This man is Arudia's legend. Mentioning anyone's name would still prove futile, replied Pierre agitatedly. What? In that case, there's no way around it. But the Jones family is acquainted with the god of war. Didn't you mention Anson's name to him? Anson is his right man. I don't think he'll make things difficult for you as a favor to Anson, said Michael, feeling puzzled. Don't even mention it. The god of war said he doesn't even know Anson. I was almost shot dead. Mr. Jones, you're so unreliable. Michael was confused. Something's wrong. How is it possible for him to not recognize Anson? He must be saying that out of fury. That must be it. Pierre must have angered the man to the extent that no one could change his mind. You probably provoked him, didn't you? Useless. You almost sabotaged the Jones family. Michael hung up the call quickly. Afraid that the Jones family would be ruined as well, he no longer wanted to speak with Pierre. When Levi returned to the office, Zoe asked in surprise, "Where did you go?" "I went to teach Star Entertainment a lesson," replied Levi. "Ha! Stop boasting. I don't buy that." Zoe did not pay much attention to what he said. However, her secretary and Helena rushed in soon after. "Ms. Lopez, something bad happened. Pierre brought a bunch of people to the office. Looks like they're up to something bad," exclaimed the secretary in worry. The other company directors were extremely worried too. After all, Star Entertainment was one of the incumbents in the industry. It was not a good thing to be targeted by them. Yet, it was obvious that Pierre brought people here to take revenge. "Let's go and take a look," commanded Zoe with a cold expression, not afraid of Pierre. Soon, she arrived at the lobby. Even Seth came along, wanting to protect Zoe. They strode into the lobby aggressively and confronted the group of men. "Let me warn you. Don't do anything rash. I won't be courteous to anyone who dares to create trouble here." Seth stood at the front with the security guards, glaring daggers at Pierre and his men. Zoe too, eyed Pierre coldly, waiting to see what tricks they were up to. Thud. To their utter surprise, Pierre and the rest fell onto their knees. The Protector Chapter 765. All of them knelt in front of Zoe. That included Star Entertainment's boss and 18 of its most popular celebrities. What's going on with them? This sudden scene caught everyone off guard. Why are they kneeling? Zoe and the others had no clue of what was happening. Aren't they supposed to come for revenge? Zoe, the secretary, and Seth exchanged incredulous glances with one another. The first person who simultaneously appeared in their minds was Levi. Does this really have something to do with him? Kneeling on the floor, Pierre groveled at her feet. "Ms. Lopez, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sabotaged you, or threatened to acquire your company." Thud. 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 Pierre kowtowed so forcefully that his forehead bled. As Levi had specifically asked him to apologize to Zoe, he did not dare to take it lightly. Other than him, all the celebrities and influencers joined him too. They should not have pretended to be arrogant big shots. Sarah even begged for Seth's forgiveness for the words she had said to him. On the other hand, everyone on Zoe's side was stunned, unable to comprehend what was happening. "What are these?" "Ms. Lopez, Star Entertainment will suspend all activities for 3 months, and you can use our resources whenever and however you want." Pierre even offered to activate all their connections to help Zoe develop her company's entertainment projects for 3 months. "Ms. Lopez, please accept our favors." Speaking, Pierre sprawled on the ground. "Okay, I'll accept it. But can you tell me what happened?" asked Zoe confusedly. This was everyone's query too. What made Pierre and these arrogant people change their attitudes so drastically? Ms. Lopez, we broke some rules and received a harsh lesson. We've realized our mistake now, explained Pierre helplessly. Ms. Lopez, we'll take our leave first. With regards to Star Entertainment's resources, I'll send someone over immediately. With that, Pierre and his men left. They were going to roll out an orientation on proper etiquette for all their celebrities. When Pierre left, the secretary received an update. Ms. Lopez, they probably committed a mistake at the military camp and was chased out, reported the secretary. But this is a good thing for us. We can use all of Star Entertainment's resources for 3 months. Zoe nodded in approval. It'd be a waste for us not to use them. Coincidentally, Helena's new movie is going to be released soon. Let's tap on their resources for that, suggested Zoe, with a smile. At that moment, Levi pushed the door open and entered. What happened? Did those guys come and apologize? The Protector Chapter 766. When Levi said that, everyone glanced at him with bated breath. Zoe and the other two had the same idea. Could it be that this is all Levi's doing? The timing is just right. Previously, Levi said that he'll settle this incident. When he returned, Pierre and the others came. It must be him. But how did he do that? Star Entertainment is one of the top 3 entertainment companies in the nation. How is it possible for Pierre to cave into him and even stop business for 3 months? These questions circled around their minds. They were exceedingly confused. Yet, they left after apologizing, and even begged us to use Star Entertainment's resources to our heart's content, replied Zoe. Levi nodded and said, good then. Zoe felt too embarrassed to ask Levi how he did it. However, she thought of a possibility. After Levi left, Zoe instructed her secretary, check how Star Entertainment's stocks are doing. The staff checked it quickly. Other than Pierre, the Jones family in South Hampton owns the highest share of 20%. Indeed. Zoe heaved a sigh of relief. Earlier, she guessed that Levi managed to achieve it through tapping on his connections with the Jones family in Southampton. Now, she was certain. The Jones family was Star Entertainment's biggest shareholder. Making Pierre do all that was merely a piece of cake for them. Darling, thanks for your help. Zoe was extremely touched. She knew Levi hated the Jones family and would not even deign to acknowledge them. However, this was the second time he asked the Jones family for a favor on her behalf. This was equivalent to him throwing his pride aside. Furthermore, Levi was one of the most prideful people she knew. Darling, I'm very touched. However, unknown to Zoe, that was not what happened at all. The Jones family had nothing to do with this. As everything was too coincidental, she misunderstood. However, Zoe decided to keep everything a secret and did not ask Levi about it. Then, with the help of Star Entertainment, the new movie released by Oriental Star Group skyrocketed to unprecedented popularity. Helena, the female lead, rose to stardom and became one of the nation's most popular A-listers. The movie star never imagined all these to happen. Half a year ago, she was still an unknown celebrity, worrying about her meager monthly income of $3,000. 6 months later, she became a popular celebrity in the country. Everything was all because of Levi and Zoe, hence Helena was extremely grateful to them. Not only that, but she also even donated some money in secret to help those in need. Helena, if all of the celebrities are as kind as you, I wouldn't be so angry, said Levi with a laugh. The Protector Chapter 767. Zoe was very pleased with Helena's results and character. Helena, your popularity skyrockets recently. A lot of people might be seeking you out now. Please resist the temptation and not fall into any traps," advised Zoe. "I understand, Ms. Lopez." Helena was too popular now. Numerous advertisers sought to hire her as their spokesperson, while many agencies tried to steal her away by offering high salaries. However, Helena was not tempted at all. Instead, she followed all Zoe's arrangements. When the billionaires from overseas offered high amounts of money to invite Helena to drink with them, she refused. Yet, what she did not expect was that she caught the eyes of the Southampton Prince gang. At that moment, a group of youngsters were smoking and drinking together in a luxurious club at Southampton. Tyler and Wales Jones were amongst them. They were the notorious Prince gang of Southampton. How impressive was the gang! Timothy, the eldest son of the Caesar family, was merely one of the most insignificant members in the gang. Even Tyler was only in the middle of the hierarchy. In other words, the wealthy youngsters, who were predicted to be the most powerful people of Southampton in the future, were all there. They represented the entire nation. Those men at the top of the hierarchy were even more impressive. They belonged to the most powerful families of Southampton. Even a royal family like the Jones would have to look up to them. "Did you guys hear? There's a new female celebrity called Helena!" exclaimed Bentley Brooks with a grin. "Of course. She's such a chaste woman. Some wealthy businessmen offered her hundreds of millions just to drink with them, but she's not tempted at all. That's expected. After all, she had never been in a relationship. Hence, she can still stick to her principles after becoming popular." Everyone were discussing enthusiastically. Even Tyler and Wales were interested. "I like this woman," a voice suddenly rang out. Everyone, who was initially discussing excitedly, fell silent and looked at the person respectfully. It was Lucas Quinn. He was the future heir of the Quinn family, which was one of the top 3 royal families in Southampton. He was considered the true big shot. Even Tyler was nothing compared to him. The Quinn family's influence was 4 times bigger than the Jones family. This was, quite precisely, the difference between the both of them. As the eldest son of the Quinn family, Lucas was considered a genius. Not only was his academic outstanding, but he was also skilled in combat. He was one of the top 3 members of the Prince gang, only second after the Prince. When he spoke, everyone paused mid-action. Twirling a cigar between his fingers, an unreadable expression crossed Lucas' handsome face. "Wow, it's so rare for a woman to catch your eyes, Lucas," flattered Tyler. From what they recall, Lucas' girlfriend were all top beauties. It was very uncommon for him to fancy anyone. Taking a puff of his cigar, Lucas said, "I've investigated this woman. She suits my taste. But what delighted me more is her boss, Zoe. She's a greater beauty. I want both of them." The Protector Chapter 768. Everyone gasped in shock. Lucas certainly pulled no punches this time. Exchanging glances with each other, Tyler and Wales subconsciously said, "We know Zoe. She's indeed one of the best. Although she's married, she's still a virgin." Lucas glanced at them suspiciously. "How do you guys know her so well?" Wales explained, "Because the Jones family." At that moment, Tyler interrupted him, "It's because we saw Zoe personally during our trip to South City. I think she's a much better choice." As he spoke, he fiercely glared at Wales, reprimanding him for almost mentioning Levi's name. The Jones family refused to acknowledge Levi's identity and existence. Revealing his identity was a humiliation for them. Especially in social circles like the Prince gang, it was better if no one else knew about Levi. After all, it was a disgrace to the family. It's very likely they would hear mocking like, so there's such a homeless hobo in the Jones family, hey. By then, they would be deemed as outcasts by everyone else. Not finding anything suspicious, Lucas grinned. That's great. They'll definitely be mine. Lucas, let's go to South City, shall we? Suggested the others. Okay. We'll set off tomorrow. Finished speaking, Lucas took a puff of his cigar again. Naturally, Zoe and Helena were completely oblivious to their impending danger, and were still preparing for the fan meeting. That day, Meredith and Robert went to Zoe's office personally. Under the facade of visiting Zoe, they were actually trying to check on the progress of the 50 billion project. The pair met Levi at the corridors coincidentally. Seeing how lively and vigorous he was, they became consumed with anger. Logan was still lying in the hospital, yet Levi looked completely unscathed. How could they not be infuriated? Don't be too delighted yet, youngster. The Black family will never spare you, Meredith warned, whispering softly beside Levi's ears. Bring it on then, replied Levi with a cold smile. How can I even be bothered by the Black family? If it were not for Zoe, it'd be a piece of cake for me to destroy the Black family. The old couple then went to Zoe's office and checked the progress. Are you sure you want to marry Levi? Out of the blue, Meredith asked. Zoe nodded. Yes. Regardless of how the both of you try to stop me, I'll still marry him. Her attitude was firm. With a smile, the grandmother said, Zoe, of course you can marry Levi. However, he must make changes until we're satisfied with him. Only then will we not stop your marriage. We met him earlier. He's still a listless and unambitious man. How can you marry such a man? Zoe asked directly. Tell me your conditions, Grandma. The Protector Chapter 769. It's simple. There's still some time before your marriage. Before that, Levi must earn 1 billion, depending on his own capabilities, Meredith declared. Zoe's eyebrows knitted together. It's a short time before the wedding day. How can he earn 1 billion by then? Oh, right. The Jones family. Zoe agreed instantly. Sure. 1 billion it is then. Remember, no one else can help him, reiterated Robert. Yeah, that's right. 6 years ago, he gained a net worth of billions within a single year. Now, he has to depend on himself to earn 1 billion. We want him to recreate what he was capable of back then. After listening to their points, Zoe knew she had fallen for their trick. It was simply too difficult for Levi to earn 1 billion without any resources. Meredith and Robert probably dared to suggest that because they knew Levi wouldn't be able to achieve so. Zoe, since you've agreed, you must not go back on your words. A delighted smile appeared on the grandparents' faces. After they left, Zoe slumped onto the chair, blaming herself for agreeing too quickly. How can Levi earn 1 billion in such a short amount of time? However, as she had already agreed, she had no choice but to look for Levi. When he heard what she said, he burst out into laughter. Just 1 billion? I thought it'd be 10 trillion. When Zoe saw Levi's confident expression, she was taken aback. How could he be so confident? Is 1 billion really a piece of cake for him? You probably didn't hear the conditions right. No one is allowed to help you. You can only depend on yourself, reminded Zoe. Okay, no problem. Levi chuckled. His black credit card held much more than 1 billion. Meredith and Robert would be utterly dumbfounded if they knew how much money he had. Okay, then do your best. I'll pay attention to you, but I won't offer any assistance. At all," said Zoe. However, for the subsequent period of time, Levi disappointed her. He did not take any actions at all, still resuming his listless days of doing nothing. Zoe ignored him and went on with handling Helena's fan meeting. On that day, Zoe and Helena went together. The fans erupted into cheers. They were already happy enough to see Helena, but they did not expect her boss to be even more attractive. This trip is definitely worth it. From afar, a few men stared at the two women on stage. "Lucas, did you see her? I'm right when I said that Zoe's a beauty, hey?" asked Tyler as he chuckled. "Not bad. If I get them, you will get your reward." Taking off his sunglasses, Lucas' gaze never left Zoe and Helena. No praise which he had his eyes on could ever escape. The Protector Chapter 770. Lucas commanded, after the fan meeting, "Invite them to our party." "Understood, Lucas." "Consider it done," chorused everyone simultaneously. The man left afterwards, waiting for the two women's arrival at a French restaurant. He loved formalities, always ensuring that everything was romantic. Otherwise, it would be such a waste to just sleep with these women. As the atmosphere must be perfect, he instructed the others to invite the ladies over instead of forcing them to come. In the evening, Helena and Zoe were about to leave after the fan meeting ended. However, there was an Rolls-Royce parked at the entrance. A few servants, all wearing suits, stood at the side of the car. The butler at the front bowed in a gentlemanly manner. "Hello, Ms. Lopez and Ms. Engler. On behalf of Mr. Lucas Quinn from Southampton, I extend his invitation to dinner to both of you." Right that moment, Levi drove to the front and blocked the Rolls-Royce's path. "Hop in. I'll treat you to a meal," said Levi. Hence, Helena and Zoe refused the butler's request. They entered Levi's car directly and sped off. The servants stood there in a daze before returning to their senses. What happened? Who took them away? Everyone was flabbergasted. Not only did they fail to invite them, but a man also fetched them away. Quick! Chase after them! But Levi's car was nowhere to be spotted. Everyone was dumbstruck. How were they going to explain it to Mr. Quinn? In the French restaurant, Lucas looked at the servants in front of him and laughed. "Someone fetched those women away right in front of your eyes?" asked Lucas. As he ate his steak, holding a knife in his left hand and a fork in his right. The middle-aged butler lowered his head. Trembling, he replied, "Yes, Mr. Quinn. We didn't manage to catch up with them. However, I've already sent people to look for them." Lucas beckoned him with his finger. "Come." Confused, the butler walked toward him. "Sir, what can I do for you?" Suddenly, a cold glint appeared in Lucas' eyes. Swoosh! He stabbed the fork in his hands into the butler's body. Swoosh! 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 Lucas repeated his actions forcefully. Blood splattered everywhere. After a dozen stabs, the butler had already stopped breathing. His body toppled straight onto the floor with a loud thud. "You useless pieces of shit!" bellowed Lucas. "We're sorry, Mr. Quinn." The other servants were so scared that they fell onto their knees, begging for mercy. Lucas walked to them with the cutleries in his hands. Swoosh! Swoosh! He stabbed frantically at the rest of the servants, causing blood to spew everywhere. The Protector Chapter 771. Only when the knife became bent did he stop. However, by then, all of his servants were dead. Walking back to his seat, Lucas took out a white handkerchief and wiped the bloodstains away from his hand. "Someone, give me a new set of cutleries," ordered Lucas. Then, he continued savoring his steak. The corpses sprawled on the ground and the metallic stench of blood filling the room did not affect him at all. He still had the appetite to eat. Those who understood Lucas knew that he often had unpredictable mood swings. On one hand, he could create a romantic atmosphere in a French restaurant. Yet on the other hand, he could instantly transform into a crazy murderer. In simpler words, Lucas was a psychopath. As long as something crossed him, he killed. In recent years, he had killed more than 100 of his family's servants and butlers, let alone the others. The Queen's young master could be considered a demented mass murderer. Hence, many people in the Prince gang were terrified of him. Even though Joan's family had the god of war as their protector, Tyler dared not boast about it to Lucas. If he angered the man, he might be killed mercilessly. Hence, he had no choice but to keep flattering Lucas. Soon, the corpses were removed and the members of the Prince gang arrived. One by one. What? Someone fetched the ladies away. Everyone was surprised. Who would dare to do such a thing? Do they have a death wish? I want to know who he is too. Lucas drank the red wine elegantly. No one could tell that he had killed 5 people earlier. For snatching the women you like, the person must die. Don't worry, Lucas. We've already sent someone to investigate. Soon, we'll find out where they are, assured the rest flatteringly. News arrived 10 minutes later, saying that they had found out where Helena and Zoe were. They were eating at the Stardust Hotel, located in the city center. Let's go. I want to take a look at the Bast *RD. Lucas stood up, looking very curious as well. The Prince gang rushed to the Stardust Hotel as fast as they could. Helena actually suggested to buy the couple a meal to express her gratitude. Levi did not stand on ceremony either, and directly brought them to the most expensive Stardust Hotel. When someone saw the car parked at the entrance, he pointed at it and declared, "Mr. Quinn, Helena and Zoe entered this car." A smile played on Lucas' lips. He glanced at the car and said, "Let's go in." They entered the lobby and saw Zoe and the rest seated beside the window. "It's him." Tyler and Wales spotted Levi instantly, and decided to back off. If they went over, Levi would recognize them. They could not afford to be embarrassed by him. Furthermore, Levi had angered Lucas. The Protector Chapter 772. Lucas, something happened in our family. We need to return to Southampton. They thought of an excuse quickly. Leave. Don't affect my mood. Tyler and Wales did not want Levi to beg them for mercy when he was going to be killed. Not only would it embarrass them, but they might also get involved if Lucas found out about their relationship with Levi. It was better for them to escape. In the restaurant, Lucas walked toward Levi and the other 2 with the Prince gang following along. The 3 of them, who were initially eating and chatting, sensed something amiss. Raising their heads, they noticed those men standing beside them. Each of them wore luxurious clothing, exuding a dignified aura. "How can I help you?" asked Zoe. "Hello, Ms. Lopez and Ms. Engler. I'm an admirer of yours." Lucas introduced himself politely. "And you are?" asked Zoe. "I'm Lucas Quinn from Southampton. Can I get to know you?" Lucas was full of smiles. His courteous attitude made it hard for anyone to refuse. "No." At that moment, a voice rang out. It was Levi, who was still eating. "No." Lucas and everyone else turned their gazes to Levi. "We're eating. Please don't disturb us." Without even raising his head, Levi continued eating. His cold attitude upset the Prince gang. After all, no one had shown such disrespect to them in the past. Maintaining a gentlemanly front, Lucas said, "Sir, I did not ask you I was asking. The two ladies. I know, but they're both my women. I've rejected you on their behalf. Go quickly. They don't want to know you. His remarks were so shocking to the prince gang that they almost burst into laughter. So there's someone who isn't fear of death. How dare he disrespects Lucas? Hearing that, Lucas chuckled. Are you saying that both of them are yours? Yet. What about it? Replied Levi coldly. Lucas noticed that Zoe's expression remained calm, while Helena looked shy. He seems to be telling the truth. There's something wrong with the three of them. Interesting. Then, I want to buy a drink for your women. How's that? A sick, domineering and arrogant smirk appeared on Lucas' face. He had shown his true self. Lucas was the type who found it exciting to invite a woman in front of her man. They're not free. Hurry up and leave. Levi was already running out of patience. Haha. Okay. I'll take my leave now. However, I'll be waiting for you at the entrance. Lucas actually left courteously, and went waiting at the entrance. What should we do? It's obvious that they are here with malicious intents. Zoe and Helena panicked. Let's pretend nothing happened. With a calm expression, Levi continued eating and drinking his wine. The Protector Chapter 773. Although Levi could still keep his cool, the ladies were completely flustered. They could tell that Lucas and the rest were not ordinary person. From their clothing and aura, apparently they came from a powerful background. They might get themselves into trouble if they crossed those men. Don't worry. Since I'm here, nothing will happen to you, said Levi with a smile. For some reason, Zoe and Helena felt assured when they heard his words, especially Helena, who gazed at Levi admiringly. To her, Levi was a mysterious man who was not as listless as how everyone had said. To her, Levi was exceptionally impressive, and had a good eye and great foresight. He was definitely a prominent man. After the meal, Silas will send you back. I'll settle them, announced Levi calmly. Be careful. Call me if anything happens. Zoe was not concerned. As he was related with the Jones family in Southampton, she assumed no one would dare to make things difficult for Levi. She had a mindset: Levi used his identity as the Jones family's grandson to solve problems. After dinner, Silas fetched Zoe and Helena away from the back door. Levi lit up a cigarette and swaggered out of the entrance. There was a Rolls-Royce parked at the entrance, and a dozen sports cars blocking the road too. They were disrupting the hotel's business. However, when the boss learned about their identities, he did not dare to say anything. Not only did he let them park there, but he also even sent some waiters to attend to their needs. The gang surrounded Levi the moment he stepped out of the hotel. You are a courageous soul, hey! Mocked everyone. Lucas glanced behind him and asked, where are the ladies? They've left, replied Levi. Hey! Everyone was stunned. Why didn't we realize it? They left through the back door. Those men were instantly filled with regret. A furious look flashed across Lucas's face as he said coldly, Sir, that's a bit dishonest of you. I said I want to invite your women over for drinks. Why did you ask them to leave beforehand? This was how domineering Lucas was. He was blatantly inviting the ladies for drinks in front of their partner, yet he made it sound like it was the most natural thing to do. Do you think that you're really cool? Levi suddenly asked. Hey! Everyone was taken aback, especially Lucas. No one had ever said that to him. Everyone he interacted with were all very deferential to him, not even daring to breathe loudly. It was interesting to meet someone as straightforward as Levi. How would you like me to say it then? In a cruder manner? All right. Bast *RD, lend me your women. I want to sleep with them tonight, declared Lucas. Ha ha ha. The Prince gang erupted into laughter as they looked at Levi mockingly. The Protector Chapter 774. However, they did not notice a cold glint that flashed across Levi's eyes. He could tolerate it if they joked about him. However, Zoe was out of bounds. Death was certain if they touched his raw nerve, and Zoe was his bottom line. So you like to be crude and straightforward, hey? Yeah dude. Lucas wants to sleep with your women. Be obedient and send them to his bed. Everyone guffawed. Lucas also smiled and said, that's what I meant. Looks like I shouldn't be so gentlemanly in the future. Why are you glaring at me? Do you want to hit me? Come and punch me, then. Provoked the Queen's heir with a smirk. He even brought his face closer to Levi. Lucas had done this multiple times, yet no one ever dared to hit him. Usually, the person would end up on his knees, begging for mercy and then send his wife to him. Boom! Suddenly, he felt a powerful gust of wind as a black shadow filled his vision. His expression changed drastically. With a crisp and loud sound, Levi slapped Lucas' cheek harshly, sending him flying almost 10 meters away. He landed on a sports car heavily, with a couple of teeth knocked out of his mouth. The gang was utterly stunned as they looked at Levi in disbelief. He actually hits Lucas? Lucas lay on top of the sports car with a numb expression as shock filled his eyes. That was certainly not something he had expected. Then, a wave of excruciating pain hit him. For a whole minute, everyone stood frozen to the spot before returning to their senses. You actually hit him. Do you know who he is? He is the eldest son of the Quinn family, one of the top 3 royal families of Southampton. He's also one of the 3 ringleaders of the Prince gang. Do you know how stupid you were? You have just caused your family's demise. The Prince gang started rebuking him. In the southern region of Arudaya, let alone in Southampton, no one would dare to slap Lucas. Yet, someone from the insignificant South City did so. This was something unbelievable to the rest, as if they had just witnessed an ant fighting against an elephant. They could hardly comprehend what had happened. You deserve that. Eyeing Lucas, Levi continued, consider yourself lucky. If it's in the past, you'd be long dead. His tone was extremely cocky and arrogant, but he was not lying. In the past, after his departure from the battlefields, Lucas would die the moment he said something like that. With that, Levi prepared to leave. Stop that man! Bellowed Lucas. The Protector Chapter 775. The Prince gang did it accordingly. How dare you leave after hitting Lucas? Do you think that we're just props? Are you looking down on the Prince gang? Many of the members were very cocky people. Now that they met Levi, who was way more arrogant than them, they could not stand it anymore. Levi laughed. Why? Do you want me to beat him till he dies? You're such a cocky bast *RD. The Prince gang was astounded. They had never seen such an impudent man like him. He was up against the Prince gang, the most feared organization in the entire southern region. You're the first person who dares to act so haughtily in front of us, yelled everyone furiously. So are you forcing me to stay just to see how arrogant I am? Asked Levi with a smirk. Do you want to die? How dare you hit Lucas? Today, I'll definitely break your limbs, knock your teeth off, rip all your hair out, tear your nails, and stab your kneecaps. I'll make you apologize to Lucas on your knees. Everyone in the Prince gang threatened Levi menacingly. They had many ruthless methods up their sleeves. To them, Levi was nothing but a punch bag. They had already thought of how to torment him. Cripple him right away. I don't want to see him standing anymore. The searing pain from his hand and mouth caused Lucas to bellow in rage. The Prince gang attacked instantly. Bang! 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 However, they were up against the unparalleled god of war, who was so powerful that even other nations dared not cross him. Although some of the members of the Prince gang were skilled in combat, they were simply too weak in Levi's eyes, as weak as mere defenseless women. Levi took them out punch by punch. Soon, all of them were sprawled on the floor as they miserably howled in regret. Initially, they thought no one would dare to offend them in South City. Hence, they did not even bring their bodyguards along. This was what led to their pathetic defeat. How dare you beat us? You'll die. You'll regret it. Threatening Levi, the Prince gang still refused to relent as they lay on the ground. Slam! Levi stepped onto them. Ugh! Screams of agony escaped their mouths. Stepping on the bodies, Levi strode over slowly amidst their miserable howls. Not only did it hurt, but their pride had also been trampled under Levi's feet. Despite being the mighty Prince gang, they were now being stepped on. What an utter disgrace! Levi reached Lucas at last. The latter panicked. What? What do you want? The Protector Chapter 776. When Lucas saw Levi's harmless smile, he felt that he was confronted by the Grim Reaper. Levi looked like the epitome of terror. His gaze was so sharp that Lucas felt like Levi was looking right into the depths of his soul, even the terror that was filling him right now. What's going on? Lucas' body quivered uncontrollably. He had never feared anyone in his life, despite having met many prominent people. However, for an unknown reason, he felt an inexplicable sense of fear facing Levi. Didn't you stop me from leaving? Asked Levi. I didn't, stuttered Lucas, unable to complete his sentence. Looks like I can only leave after you're dead. A ruthless glint flashed across Levi's eyes. Thud. Lucas was about to say something when Levi aimed a punch on his face, causing blood to spurt out from him. Thud. 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 After a few consecutive punches, Lucas was covered in blood. You can't mess around with anyone's woman. As Levi wiped his hands and walked away, Lucas toppled straight onto the ground with a loud thud. Having lost his consciousness, blood dribbled down his mouth. The Prince gang regretted now. Why did we stop him from leaving? Quick! Go to the hospital. We have to save Lucas. The group then sped off to the hospital. In the office building, Zoe heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Levi return unscathed. However, she did not ask whether the matter was resolved. To her, she believed that it would definitely be settled due to Levi's association with the Jones family. Silas, pick 2 elites from the security team to protect Helena. There's been a lot of people harassing her recently, instructed Levi as he glanced at Helena. Understood. Silas nodded. The new security team was made up of discharged soldiers. All of them were top-notch fighters, armed with great combat skills. Iris wanted Helena to be protected too. Recently, Morris Group's electronic products were released in the market. With Helena as their spokesperson, the sales had been amazingly good. Zoe invested the Black family's $50 billion in the electronic industry. This meant the Morris Group had helped the Black family reap the most profits. Levi, follow me. I have something to tell you. Zoe summoned Levi to her office. Levi, did you think of a way to earn that $1 billion? Zoe wanted to ask about Levi's progress. However, he did not seem to be taking it seriously. $1 billion. Are they looking down on me? How about we add the amount to 100 billion? Suggested Levi with a chuckle. Stop joking. Do you care about me at all? The Protector Chapter 777. Levi was taken aback by Zoe's sudden question. Hey! By asking you to earn 1 billion in a short amount of time, Grandpa and Grandma wants you to prove that you are worthy of me. Then, they will have no reason to separate us. No matter what, it's an unchangeable fact that they're my relatives. The only thing we can do is to satisfy them to the best of our abilities, so that it is a win-win situation. But I think you aren't even taking it seriously. Other than sleeping and eating, you don't do anything else, stated Zoe furiously. Levi smiled. It's easy to settle this. Just wait and see. Indeed, it was a piece of cake to him. He could produce 1 billion whenever he wanted to. However, Zoe assumed that Levi's method of resolving the issue was to use his identity as the Jones family's grandson. It was extremely easy to earn 1 billion by using the Jones family's name. This could convince the Black family, but Zoe was not pleased. What she cared about was Levi's attitude, instead of him resolving everything using that identity. She hoped Levi could work hard like 6 years ago and build his success with his own effort. So be it, said Zoe with a sigh. As she watched the man leave, she whispered, I wish I'm marrying to the unparalleled, wealthy, and formidable Levi. However, judging from the current situation, Zoe knew it was only her wishful thinking. Levi was no longer as driven as before. Although it was impossible for him to meet her expectations, she was still hopeful. Naturally, Levi did not understand what she meant. He simply thought that she was being ridiculous. At that moment, the Prince gang was in a private hospital, each of them covered with bruises. They heaved a sigh of relief when the doctor declared that Lucas was fine. Only his nose bridge and brow bone were broken. If something bad happened to Lucas, the entire South City would be in an uproar. After all, he belonged to the top 3 families of Southampton, whose power was 4 times greater than the Jones. The mighty Quinn family would definitely be infuriated. By then, who could afford to bear the consequences? At that moment, they suddenly heard a commotion in the hospital ward. Entering the room, they saw Lucas stabbing a doctor over and over again. The doctor's white coat was completely stained with blood. Lucas was trying to vent his anger by stabbing everyone within his sight. He was really an inhumane murderer. Don't be too agitated, Lucas. The doctor saved you. Everyone held him back, who yelled furiously, I've been so utterly humiliated. So what if he cures me? I'll definitely skin that bast *RD alive. The Protector Chapter 778. We understand your rage, Lucas. That bast *RD humiliated us too. He has destroyed the Southampton Prince gang's reputation. Only by skinning him alive can we vent our hatred. Everyone else was equally furious. Lucas, you should focus on recovering first. Once you get better, we'll go teach him a lesson. Anyway, there's nowhere for him to escape to, persuaded the rest. To hell with recovering. If I don't kill that man, I can never tolerate this. Lucas was harsh even on himself. Ripping the needles from the infusion bottles away from his hand, he got off the bed. The nurses and doctors were taken aback. I'll seek treatment after I kill that man. Lucas left just like that. However, his entire face was swollen, with only his eyes and mouth discernible. What happened today was beyond everyone's wildest imagination. No one would expect the Prince gang to end up in such a miserable state. Not only was the rest beaten up, but even Lucas was also badly hurt. If the others in Southampton knew about this, there would be an uproar. Whatever happened today must not spread to Southampton. Instructed Lucas. The men placed great importance on their reputation. If anyone knew about this, they would be a joke forever. But we'll definitely need more men if we want to kill that bast *road. Someone asked, should I summon more men secretly? No. Someone will notice if a skilled fighter in Southampton is summoned. If my grandpa asks about it, I won't be able to give him a proper explanation. Lucas shook his head. What should we do? Asked the rest. The 4 kings of the Southern Union have control over this area. I'll request Yadriel to lend me some skilled fighters, answered Lucas. When they went to Yadriel's villa, the man and the rest were shocked. How did you end up this way? Yadriel was taken aback. To be honest, even the Southern Union needed to be wary of the Prince gang. Even Grover had warned the members to not cross the gang. If a conflict started, the gang would definitely not give up so easily. In fact, they would be up against the combined forces of all the wealthy families in Southampton. Hence, he was utterly shocked at the miserable state the gang was in. Yadriel, I'll cut straight to the point. Lend me 100 men. Don't ask me why. Also, I hope this stays between us, said Lucas. Yadriel had no choice but to agree to Lucas' request. He immediately selected 100 skilled fighters for the latter. With these experts, the Prince gang was all ready to confront Levi. The Protector Chapter 779. In the villa, Yadriel was still wondering who beat Lucas up. That person must be a gutsy person. This is equivalent to him opposing the entire Prince gang. Sir, this is so strange. Who in South City would dare to beat Lucas? Yet, I can't think of anyone. Even in Southampton, no one would dare to beat him, right? His subordinates were equally puzzled, unable to think of a logical explanation. Yadriel stroked his chin. It's probably a private matter. He doesn't even dare to tell me. No, there's one person in South City who would dare to do so, reminded someone suddenly. Everyone exchanged knowing glances. Immediately, Yadriel realized who he was talking about. Previously, the Southern Union suffered a great loss in the same manner. He was absolutely certain that the person in mind was the one who offended Lucas. There was no one else in South City who would dare to beat him up. Quick, catch up with him. This is bad. Let's hope it's still not too late. Yadriel chased after them with a few of his men. If Lucas offended that person, the entire Southampton Prince gang would be destroyed. Even their families would be ruined. It was critical to stop them in time. However, Lucas and the rest were simply too fast, having disappeared from Yadriel's sight soon. Lucas, we've found out that the guy is called Levi Garrison. He's staying in Morris Group's apartment building with Zoe. The insight came very quickly. Okay. Lead us there. A cold, ruthless glint flashed across Lucas' eyes. I will massacre everyone there, before breaking Levi's limbs and crippling him. Just torture him in any method possible. I want him to die in agony. Still not satisfied, Lucas continued furiously, I'll even sleep with both of his women right in front of his eyes. Then, looking at the rest, he announced, after I have a go with the ladies, you guys can sleep with them one by one, right in front of him. I want to torture him to death. Everyone gasped in shock. Indeed, Lucas is a pervert. He is more terrifying than we have expected. Not only does he plan on tormenting Levi emotionally and physically, but he also wants to torture him to death. This is absolutely frightening. We must never offend him. Everyone followed the man fearfully and soon arrived at the apartment building owned by the Morris Group. They were stopped by the security guards at the entrance. Who are you? What are you doing here? The security guards were Silas' battle mates. They stared at Lucas and the rest warily. At that same time, they reported what was going on to the control room through the walkie-talkie. What are we doing here? We're here to kill. With a ruthless glare, Lucas gave a command. The 100 skilled fighters drew their knives and charged forward. The Protector Chapter 780. What are you doing? At that moment, Levi and a few men arrived. Zoe and Helena had also rushed over after hearing the news. Looking at the 100 armed men, they quivered in fear. Stop! With a wave of his hand, Lucas gestured for everyone to stop. Bast *RD, you'll pay a huge price for what you've done! Yelled Lucas. It was a meeting between enemies. When the Southampton Prince gang saw Levi, it was like they had gone mad. They wished for nothing more than to devour Levi's meat and drink his blood. No one, other than him, had humiliated them so badly. Lucas was particularly enraged. The moment he saw Levi, he was shooting daggers at the latter with his eyes. In his mind, he imagined Levi ripped apart into a dozen pieces. The ladies recognized them too. Zoe's mind became completely blank. She thought Levi had resolved the matter, but she did not expect his solution was to beat them up. Back at the Black family's house, she had already realized how skilled Levi was at fighting. You actually beat them up? Asked Zoe in disbelief. They asked for it, replied Levi calmly. But you've gotten yourself in so much trouble. Look at how many people there are. Zoe was getting a little angry at Levi's attitude. On the other hand, Helena started to panic. This is all because of me. I'll just accompany them for a drink. Nothing will happen, said Helena apologetically. She thought this entire mess was created because the men wanted to flirt with her. Yet, she did not know that Lucas had already set his eyes on her and Zoe way back at Southampton. It's fine. As long as I'm here, I won't let that happen. Zoe was a good leader who cared for her subordinates. Hence, she would never permit something like that to happen. Levi laughed. Leave it to me. It's just a piece of cake. You. Zoe glanced at Levi in surprise. The first thought that surfaced in her mind was that Levi was going to use his identity as the Jones family's grandson again. You're Levi Garrison, right? How dare you hit us? We are from the South Hampton Prince gang. The person you hit is Lucas. Let me tell you this. You've just gotten yourself into deep trouble. The Prince gang started to hurl threats at them. When Zoe heard what they were saying, fear gripped her heart. They are from Southampton. We certainly cannot afford to offend them. So? Are you not satisfied with your beating in the evening? Do you still want to get beaten up? Asked Levi as he smirked coldly at Lucas and the rest. Looking at how arrogantly Levi was acting, Lucas and the rest could not tolerate it any longer. Cut him up into pieces. There was only one thought dominating Lucas' mind: kill Levi Garrison. Yet, an unexpected scene occurred. The Protector Chapter 781. Clang! All the members of the Southern Union kneeled on the ground abruptly and shouted uniformly, "Good evening, Mr. Garrison." Their roaring voices were deafening to the ear, vibrated the chest of everyone at the scene. Helena, Zoe, Lucas, and the rest of the people were left in shock. Everyone's jaws dropped as they stared at Levi in surprise. They were in utter disbelief. Everyone thought their eyes were playing tricks on them. What's going on? Who is he that these people have to kneel before him? Can someone please explain what's actually happening now? They couldn't get their head around the scene in front of their eyes. Lucas and his men were flabbergasted the most among all. What the hell is this? The members of the Southern Union weren't out of their mind. They were sane and sober. Grover was a smart man. He had secretly shown the picture of Levi to all the members of the Southern Union and warned them about his capability. If they encountered him, the first thing to do was to kneel and avoid any conflict at all costs. On top of that, they couldn't reveal his identity to anyone. For that reason, all of them recognized Levi at the first glance, and they were horrified to know that their target was the latter. So, they kneeled right away in order to save their own lives. "Hey, why are you lots kneeling? He is the man I want to kill. Get on your feet!" Lucas roared anxiously. But no one paid him any heed, and they remained in the same posture. It was likely that they'll not move a muscle if Levi didn't give them further instructions. "What are you doing?" Lucas yelled as his edginess grew. His expression gradually became tense due to the increasing agitation. As a result, the wound on his face almost tore open, and he gritted his teeth in pain. Still, they remained on the ground and didn't budge an inch. An epiphany occurred when Zoe saw the happening, and she assumed that those people were on their knees because Levi was one of the Joneses. Otherwise, it would be unthinkable that they'd do such a thing. The only reason behind their bizarre action would be his identity as a royalty. Moreover, the way they addressed him further reinforced her assumption. So he had been using the influence of his family to settle issues lately. It seems like he's doing the same again, but at least the problem is solved. "What are you waiting for?" Levi queried in a cold tone. "We're sorry about this, Mr. Garrison." They apologized in unison. Right after that, they rose to their feet and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Lucas and the bunch behind, who were calling out for them. That left the gang in an awkward situation. The fighters they hired bailed on them. "We're just a group of defeated foes. There's no way we can exact revenge on Levi anymore. We should retreat now." "Hold on. Did I give you permission to leave?" Levi stopped them. The Protector Chapter 782. His voice immediately brought them to a standstill as they recalled the pain and horror of being beaten up by Levi in the evening. Then, they began to tremble. "We'll lose all our faces if we're beaten to a pulp again. In the case, death would be a salvation. You're coming and going as you like in my territory. Am I invisible to you?" Levi snapped in an icy tone, sending chills down everyone's spine. The crowd gasped in shock. "Whoever upsets him is running out of luck. Let's forget about it, Levi. You've already beaten them up, and the problem is solved anyway. To err is human, to forgive is divine." Zoe didn't want things to get out of control, so she took the initiative to intervene. "All right then. Consider yourself lucky today. Get lost!" Levi bellowed. The Prince gang ran for their lives immediately after they were released. "Okay. Let's all go back now. Do not say a word about what happened tonight," Zoe ordered. Thereafter, Levi thought she would inquire about the reason those people got on their knees. However, she didn't do so. It was like she already had an answer, which was rather puzzling to him. Zoe has been acting weird lately. She's not even curious about all the unusual things I've done recently. It's like she is used to it. But little did he know that Zoe had been assuming him to utilize his identity as a member of the Jones family to settle things. Meanwhile, Yadriel, who came rushing, bumped into the 100 fighters who were retreating. "Mr. Garrison had us released," the person leading the group noted. Yadriel clapped his hands as his suspicion had proven to be right. "I knew it. It's really Mr. Garrison. This is bad. They're so screwed." Following that, the man picked up his pace at once. Nevertheless, he stumbled upon Lucas' group shortly after he dashed with all his might. Did he not give you a hard time? Yadriel gazed at them in bafflement. Judging from Mr. Garrison's personality, it's unlikely he'll let them go. What happened? Levi didn't want to release us at first. He only did it after his woman talked him into it. One of them explained. At this, Yadriel heaved a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. Oh yeah. I've made some arrangements to escort you out of this city. You should head back to South Hampton at once. Staying here will spell doom for all of you. He urged. These people can't stay here. They'll most likely push Mr. Garrison's button again, and they'll be dead meat for sure. I have to send them away now. Anyhow, I'm acquainted with the Quinn family, seeing one of theirs playing with fire certainly doesn't sit well with me. Stop right there. Lucas beckoned at him. Once he came to a halt, Lucas stared into his eyes and asked, What in the world is going on? Why did your people kneel and call him Mr. Garrison the moment they saw that guy? They seemed to be afraid of the one called Levi. Who is he that even the Southern Union members are terrified at the sight of him? The Prince gang wondered. Yet, who on earth is he? The Protector Chapter 783. This question put Yadriel in a difficult spot. Should I tell them? What if the higher UPS put the blame on me? I'll be in deep trouble then. Just as he was contemplating, a voice could be heard saying, You're not worthy to know who I am. Soon after the voice, a figure slowly emerged. Yadriel's eyes almost popped out from their sockets after he got a good look at that person. Did he tail them here? I knew he wasn't planning to let the Prince gang go. At the end of the day, this is who Mr. Garrison truly is. Right before he was about to kneel, Levi gestured him to stand aside. Lucas and the rest, on the other hand, were thrown into a panic state after seeing him. What is he doing here? Didn't he let us go? Yadriel, I want you to get rid of him for me today. Whatever the cost. Lucas bawled, his voice implying he wanted Levi killed. I'll pay you 10 billion. Lucas named a hefty sum of money after seeing that he remained unfazed. Considering the amount he was willing to pay, one could roughly gauge the level of his madness and the intensity of his loathe for Levi. Everyone drew a sharp breath after hearing his words. He's insane. 10 billion for Levi's head. What an amount to squander. To his surprise, Yadriel remained uninterested and moved to the sidelines. Handle your own mess. I won't interfere. Yadriel replied indifferently. 10 billion surely is alluring. But if I take the job, I'll be dead before I even get to spend a single cent. The turn of events had caught Lucas off guard. What do I do now? Our men are all in Southampton. We're basically sitting ducks here. Didn't you give your word to let us go? Lucas asked with a trembling voice. The egoistic Prince gang was docile as a lamb in the face of Levi. They began to fear for their lives and dreaded the individual called Levi Garrison. It was my woman who promised to let you go, not me. Everyone was rendered speechless by the words of Levi while his lips curled up into a sneer. What do you want? Everyone was shuddering. After all, they had a phobia after being beaten up by him. Even a madman like Lucas was frightened by his absurdity. I need to be more ruthless to go against someone like him. I dare you to let me go back. Lucas challenged in a cold tone. Once I'm back to Southampton, I swear I'll amass a large group of men. Enough to wipe out the entire South City. It doesn't matter if I lose my face or honor, I will cut you into pieces. Just you wait. What do you say? I see that you're also a ruthless man like myself. Let's arrange a showdown. Dispatch every man you have. He continued after seeing a ray of hope. Yet, do you have the balls? If you're a man, then let us go. We'll have a face-off with real swords. The others seized the opportunity to provoke Levi. Having said that, Yadriel, who was on the sidelines, was dumbstruck. The Prince gang wants to fight with Levi. Will he accept it? The Protector Chapter 784. Needless to say, Levi understood the intention of these people. It was so that they could gather enough forces to pay back for what he did. You stay back. The rest of you, scram. Levi pointed at Lucas while commanding. Hey? Why are you detaining me? Lucas was baffled. Levi nodded. I don't take innocent lives anymore, so I'm not gonna kill you. But it doesn't mean that you'll escape being punished. You must kneel for 3 whole days to repent for your ill behaviors. Only after you've done that will I release you. With a wave of his hand, Azure Dragon, who was on standby, instantly restrained Lucas. The rest of his friends could only stare helplessly as the scene unfolded. You must come to my rescue. Send people to save me. Lucas cried out at the top of his lungs. Kneel for 3 whole days? That's not happening. Do you think that I, one of the 3 ringleaders of the Prince gang, will bow my knees before anyone? How very insulting. But I can only place my hope on the reinforcements now. It went without saying that the news of Lucas being detained must not reach the ear of Zoe. For this reason, he was transferred to Guardian Mansion. By this time, the walls and doors in the compound had been fixed. Kneel. A commanding voice could be heard. However, Lucas wouldn't give in to the order. Thud. Azure Dragon kicked the back of his knees, and he immediately fell onto the ground. Shortly, his hands and feet were bounded. At the same time, there were many large dogs keeping watch over him. The pain and humiliation had almost caused even a man like Lucas to weep. He became increasingly infuriated when the thought of having to go through this odious experience for another 3 days crossed his mind. Yet, things surely didn't go well for him as a piece of rag was stuffed in his mouth. This was the most tormenting moment of his life. Even if I managed to survive this ordeal, I'd be the laughingstock of all. Levi had none but one single rule: as long as his prisoner didn't die from starvation, anything would be fine. Therefore, his subordinates paid little attention to the one who was on his knees. With the situation getting out of hand, the escaped members of the Prince gang returned to Southampton as quickly as they could. Naturally, none of them dared to inform their own families after getting themselves into such a big trouble, let alone the Quinn family. Thus, they hurriedly reached out to the remaining 2 ringleaders of the Prince gang early the next morning. One of them was the leader of the Prince gang, Jaron Goel, who was awarded the epithet Prince. He was the most outstanding man among the younger generations in South Hampton and happened to be the heir to the biggest royal family in the city, the Goel family. Be it strength, capabilities, background, or the other aspects, he excelled in all of them. Not to mention his unchallenged mastery in the ancient arts of Qi. Rumor had it that he could go toe-to-toe with Grover. Surely, no one dared to challenge his position as the leader of the Prince gang. Thus, all the young heirs of the prominent families in Southampton would regard him as the prince. At the present moment, Jaron was wearing a bathrobe while gazing at the men in front of him. There was a worried expression on his handsome face as he declared, "Since this matter is pertaining to the Prince gang, I shall deal with it personally." The Protector Chapter 785. Give the order to everyone. Gather all our forces and we shall head to South City at once. Jaron commanded. Once the instruction was given, the other ringleader, who was regarded as an equal to Lucas, Jackson hastened to gather his men right away. With that, all the Prince Gang's top fighters were assembled and left for South City together. It was considered the biggest incident that had ever happened to the Prince Gang over the past decade. Not only did one of their ringleaders take a beating, but he was also detained. It was beyond an insult to them. To them, preserving their honor was more important than their own lives. If they lost it, they would use every means to get it back. The Prince Gang was utterly enraged this time that even their notorious prince had come in person. Yadriel was stunned when he heard this. Even the prince himself is coming. He was clearly surprised by the fact. It seems like Jaren has brought all his top fighters with him this time. He must be really pissed. Jaren is an arrogant person. He answers to no one other than that man. This time, however, he's gonna get hurt as his target is you-know-who. Yadriel sighed. Sir, should we give them a heads up? One of his subordinates queried. Do you have a death wish? The purpose of detaining Lucas is so that he could get rid of the Prince Gang once and for all. Why are you trying to get us involved in their battle? Yadriel glared at his man. Lucas was totally exhausted after kneeling all night, and for that reason, his body quivered uncontrollably. If it wasn't for the binding ropes, he would have fallen to the ground. He had fainted around 7 or 8 times throughout the entire night. Lucas was someone with great stamina from his routine martial art practice. If even he couldn't stand it, it proved just how unbearably torturing it'd be like for an average Joe. Any normal person would have met their demise after kneeling for such a long period with untreated injuries and inflammation. Even Lucas himself knew that he could only hold on for another full day at most. He could be in grave danger if this were to go on. Why are they not here yet? Lucas was on the verge of total breakdown. He cried so much last night that even his tears had dried off. Being treated like a house dog was the part that infuriated him the most. The food he was given looked exactly like kibble. Yet, in order to gain energy, he had no choice but to eat them. This was definitely the darkest and most humiliating moment in his entire life. His honor and dignity had been utterly trampled by Levi, so he could never get over it unless Levi was killed by his own hands. Vroom! Just as he was about to fall into despair, the sound of car engines could be heard from afar. Lucas forced his drooping eyes to open and peered toward the sound. His eyes gleamed the moment he identified its source. Y'all are finally here. Joyful tears spilled out from his eyes. Had it not been for the rag in his mouth, he would like to let out a few shouts. A while later, dozens of cars came to a stop in front of the Guardian Mansion. And hundreds of men got out of their vehicles. Among them stood their leaders, Jaren and Jackson. The Protector Chapter 786. The second Lucas saw the prince, he knew this issue was as good as resolved. He was not afraid of Levi's connection with the Southern Union anymore because Jaren was greater than them. Jaren wouldn't compromise, especially when it came to dealing with the issues of the Prince Gang. Ha 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 ha. Lucas laughed inwardly. You screwed up big time, Levi. You're finished. Thereafter, he was scheming on how to torment Levi, Zoe, and Helena. His mind was filled with scenes of Levi being chopped into pieces and his remains boiled in a pot. Thud. 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 In no time, units of bodyguards marched toward the Guardian Mansion and got into their formation. Everyone was equipped with weapons. Having said that, some of them were barehanded, yet they were undoubtedly elite fighters judging by the air around them. After the prince made his appearance, he was followed by 2 rows of men. Each of them was carrying an ancient dagger. These men were the prince's personal bodyguards. All of them were highly skilled fighters. Together they could take down the 4 kings of Southern Union. It just showed how powerful these people were. Including the bodyguards of the other members, there were a total of 200 top fighters at the scene. The Prince Gang's members were burning in anger after seeing Lucas's miserable appearance. This is public shaming. Our honors have been trampled. This is totally unbearable. In a heartbeat, someone came to the front of the compound but was stopped by Jaren before he could cause a ruckus. In a split second, Jaren raised his gun and pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot caused a spark from the muzzle. Whoosh! In an instant, one of military dogs tasked to watch over Lucas were headshot. The noise caught the attention of the people inside. In the blink of an eye, Levi, Azure Dragon, and the others dashed out to examine the situation. What happened? Everyone became furious the instant they saw their military-trained dog lying in a pool of blood. This dog has been with us for a long time. This is too much. A sharp glint flashed across Levi's eyes as he put on a calm expression. It was as clear as daylight that he was angry. For these dogs were no different than any human to him. To kill them in front of him was equivalent to ask for death. The sound of the gun had alarmed the surrounding people, and they gathered around after hearing that. Over 100 people showed up in a blink of an eye, and they were glaring at it. The Prince Gang angrily. Identify yourself. Azure Dragon fumed. Jaren of the Goel family in Southampton. My friends usually call me Prince. The leader remained dignified. Scanning the crowd at the scene with his sharp gaze, he said in a cold tone, I was entrusted by the patriarch of the Quinn family to pick Lucas Quinn home. Yes. We're here to pick Lucas home. The Prince Gang members shouted. Simultaneously, a unit of bodyguards formed a line in front, got on their knees, and apologized. We're sorry for coming late. Please forgive us, sir. At this, Jackson narrowed his eyes and chided, You're in deep trouble now. Release our friend this instance, or else you're gonna get it. The Protector Chapter 787. Jaren exhorted coldly, You'd better let my man go now. I'm running out of patience. Seeing that the other side didn't respond, he added, I'll count to 3. Right then, he started the countdown. 3, 2, 1. The Prince Gang became enraged at the fact that Levi and his men were unmoved even after Jaren finished counting. The next moment, Jaren signaled to his men and ordered ferociously, Charge! Bring Lucas out! In the nick of time, Lucas spat the rag out of his mouth and cried out, Prince, halt! The charge! Everyone was frozen in place while staring at Lucas in bewilderment. After a light bulb moment came to him, Jaren instructed, Stop! Following closely, he glanced at Levi's group and continued, I've changed my mind. I'll not charge in. Instead, I want you to bring him out yourself. Lucas nodded in acknowledgement. He gets me. Lucas yelled at Levi's group, I'll make you regret for messing with me. His intention was simple. He stopped Jaren from rescuing him so that he could get Levi to bring him out willingly. The Prince Gang had put together such a grand spectacle just to rescue him. Even Levi and his subordinates must be shivering in fear by now. At least, that was what he assumed. Out of terror, Levi will bring me out politely. Not only will I feel satisfied, but we'll also regain our lost honor. I want the 6 of you to bring Lucas out with your knees on the ground. The time limit is by tomorrow morning. Otherwise, I'll purge this place. It'll be a bloodbath. You're acquainted with these onlookers, right? I'll wipe out everyone in this place, including you. After Jaren had set the deadline, Lucas let out a laugh and said, Well, I for one hope that you won't release me. With that, I'll get to see everyone in this area killed. Hey, buddy. We will wait at the entrance of the street. Hang in there. Finished speaking, Jaren led his men out of the compound and waited at where. He said. Don't you worry, Prince. I can hold on much longer. But I'm afraid that they might bring me out. It'd be boring that way. I wanna see all of them die. Lucas cackled. Hysterically, like a loony. Next off, Azure Dragon asked, what should we do next, sir? Okay. I'll wait until tomorrow morning and see how he plans to kill the people. Here. Levi was truly exasperated this time as those dogs were his favorites. Bury them. Levi commanded. Later on, Lucas glanced at Levi arrogantly and sneered, that's right, keep it that way. Don't bring me out and wait until the next daybreak. You know my taste very well. I'm fond of killing. I love to see people die. The Protector Chapter 788. If he dares to keep me here, Prince will slaughter everyone in this street. I'd love to see that happen. If he brings me out, I'll get to burn the scene of Levi carrying me out on his knees like a dog into my memories. I'm more than happy to see that, and we get to regain our honor as well. Levi smirked at his words and patted his cheek. I will never let you go. You should worry about yourself first. See if you could survive tonight. Ha ha ha. Of course I will. This time round, the city streets would surely be bathed in blood. Lucas proceeded to laugh like a lunatic. Dozens of cars were blocking the entrance of the street. The Prince gang was waiting over there until the appointed time. Prince, it seems like they don't plan to bring Lucas out. A gleam of epiphany flashed across Jaren's eyes, and he commented, looks like we aren't as famous as we thought. Well, it'd be unlikely for the people from a rural city like this to hear about us, let alone be afraid of us. That's right. They wouldn't even try to detain Lucas if they knew about us. As everyone was analyzing the situation, the two ringleaders stared at each other and declared, we shall decimate the citizens of this street tomorrow. There shall be bloodshed in every corner. We won't stop until the entire South City is terrorized at the thought of our name. In the future, they'll wake up in a cold sweat from a nightmare each time they recalled of this incident. Jaren might seem polite on the outside, but he was a resolute and obstinate person. He leaned toward solving problems with extreme measures and always resorted to violence. Listen. We will station here tonight. Then, we will eradicate everyone in this street tomorrow. Jaren ordered. Yes, Prince. Everyone responded in unity. Jackson remarked with a smirk, I think they might bring Lucas out. Given the duration, they should have found out about us by now. You're right, Jackson. Everyone agreed. After a considerable time, Lucas remained on his knees while Levi showed no means to let him go. Although he was exhausted, and his body was at the edge of collapsing, he had an excited look on his face. After a long night waiting, there was no sign of Lucas getting out at all. These people have decided to oppose us until the end. At the crack of dawn, Jaren puffed on a cigarette, then threw the butt on the ground. Let's go. Jaren gave the instruction. There were about 200 fighters following the Prince gang as they marched toward the Guardian Mansion. Everyone had a murderous look on their faces. The tension in the atmosphere was so thick that one could cut it with a knife. The Protector Chapter 789. Soon, they arrived at the Guardian Mansion. Send a few units to keep all the alleys of this area off limits. Kill anyone who tries to escape. Jaren's gaze became cold, and he exuded a murderous aura that sent shivers down everyone's spine. Dozens of men immediately guarded the exits of every passageway to stop anyone from passing through. At this very moment, Lucas was nearly worn out after mustering every single ounce of strength he could find in his body. He was persevering with sheer willpower alone currently. Nonetheless, he was elated when he saw Jaren charging in with his men. In the meantime, Levi and the others also emerged from his room. Ha 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 ha, Lucas burst into laughter right when he saw them. Don't fret, punk. Once you're dead, I'll take care of your women. I'll be sure to torture them with all my might. Ha ha ha, Lucas said in a psychopathic tone. Throughout the entire time being on his knees, the man thought of nothing except the ways to torment Levi and the likes. His twisted mind had already come up with more than 100 ways to gratify his sadistic pleasure. Prince, take out everyone except this one. Leave him to me. Lucas bawled. All right. After saying that, Jaren turned to focus on Levi and proclaimed, now, you will pay the painful price for your foolish behaviors. I will kill everyone here. Kill them. At Jaren's gesture, all the fighters began their undiscriminating killing spree on the people in this area. Apart from the ones who were guarding the alleys, there were still 150 men. As bodyguards of the Prince gang members, all of them were elite fighters in their own right. They could hurl threats at the Southern Union with forces like this. Swoosh! 20 fighters sprinted to the front line promptly. Screech! Those men drew the swords from their backs. The sharpness of the weapons was unmatched, and the reflections on their edges were dazzling to the eyes. With that, the top fighters charged toward their targets. Seeing that, Levi and his men simply chortled. Unbeknownst to their opponents, the god of war and the 5 great wars regiment were invincible and unstoppable on the battlefield. They were the nightmare of those who make enemies of them. If the rest of the world came to know these ignorant warriors were trying to kill the god of war and his company of 5, everyone's jaw would drop to the floor. The following would be their first response. Who gave them the courage to do this? Are they out of their mind? However, before the fighters could even reach Levi, there was a 2-meter muscular man blocking their way. Clang! 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 The fighters tried to strike the man. Yet, as if their swords were slashing on a hard surface, they created a series of resonant metallic sounds that almost caused a spark. I could feel the strike. It definitely reached his skin, but it feels like striking on a steel. Kill them. They started another wave of attack and struck again. Crack! 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 They were taken aback at the sight of their broken swords. The Protector Chapter 790. There was a dead silence after that. Everyone was flabbergasted. What? Is he the Iron Man? His skin is impenetrable. Even the high-quality sword is broken? How terrifying! Ah! As the muscular man roared, his tank top was ripped into pieces. The man had a shredded look, with well-developed muscles covering every inch of his skin, and they were hard as steel. The Black Tortoise. He was overly eye-catching due to his bulky physique. Hence, Levi had always reminded him to keep a low profile and avoided sending him on missions. But he was summoned today as there were people who came for a showdown. The Black Tortoise was a martial art practitioner. His skills made his body impenetrable, like a layer of steel covering his skin. Levi found him on the battlefield 4 years ago. During that time, he was a fearless and undefeatable warrior. The man had blocked countless gunfire for Levi in the past. With his steel-like body, none of the bullets were able to pierce his skin, let alone some swords. Bam! 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 Like a bulldozer, the Black Tortoise crushed the fighters of the Prince gang. Within a short while, hundreds of fighters were left sprawling on the floor and screaming in agony. It was a gruesome sight. The Prince gang was left in shock. Hundreds of our top fighters couldn't stand a chance. What is this? We know the strength of our men, yet they were utterly defeated. Is that guy a human? Lucas, who was still on his knees in the compound, gazed at the happenings blankly. After this, the smugness of the Prince gang disappeared into thin air almost in an instant. Everyone was petrified beyond belief. Right then, Jackson squinted his eyes while Jaren furrowed his brows and glared at Levi's group. Things are getting tricky. The turn of events had Jaren felt a little stumped. Take his head. The leader of the gang demanded coldly. Those 20 fighters who had been following him drew their swords and darted forward. These men were his trump card. The swords they used weren't ordinary ones, they were ancient dagger with extremely sharp edges. Screech! The cold edges of the ancient daggers struck hard on Black Tortoise's body. Clang! He moved a few steps backward after many slashes, and white marks began to appear on his body. If the attacks were to continue, even the likes of the Black Tortoise would be injured. The ancient dagger is really something else. The Prince gang members put on a smile on their faces after witnessing the scene. Meanwhile, Lucas heaved a sigh of relief. Prince is as amazing as always. Who would still dare to challenge him? Back off, Black Tortoise. These are ancient daggers. You can't handle their sharpness. Levi ordered. After hearing the command, he stepped aside with his body full of white marks. Jaren peered at Levi and scoffed, looks like I've underestimated you. However, you still can't escape your eventual death. Kill him. The Protector Chapter 791. The 20 men raised their swords up high, charging toward Levi and his men. Whoosh! Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind roared to life and there was a silhouette. Flickered past them like a bolt of lightning. It was White Tiger. Among the 5 kings of war, Black Tortoise was the best at defense while White Tiger was the best at offense. Wham! Wham! White Tiger weaved through the crowd of men, his punches snapping out so quickly they were a blur. Within moments, he stopped in his tracks. Thud! 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 All 20 of his opponents crumpled to the ground like puppets that had their strings cut. A dead silence descended upon the scene. Jaren's face paled dramatically. How is he so powerful? These men were supposed to be the best of the best, the elites of his family's men. They had all been trained since young to be the perfect fighters. He had once conquered the Southern Union using only these 20 men. No one had been able to stop them back then. Yet now, they could not even defeat one person. That was a testament to how powerful White Tiger was. Seemingly satisfied by their prowess, White Tiger praised, "Not bad. You guys are stronger than those people from the Southern Union." Crooking a finger at Jaren, he continued, "Your turn." He could tell that Jaren was even more powerful than the 20 men he had just downed. Die! Jaren bellowed as he leaped at White Tiger. The 2 men clashed together violently and a ferocious battle broke out. The destruction they left was terrifying, with the walls of the yard crumbling to pieces and the wooden gates splintered. Even the ground was cracked badly, with the brick turned to dust in some places. The Prince gang was gaping at the scene with wide eyes while Levi and his men were also rather impressed. Jaren was definitely the strongest opponent White Tiger had ever fought so far. Arudai really was a country with plenty of hidden talents. It was likely they would run into more in the future. Even watching the fierce battle had the blood in their veins boiling with adrenaline and excitement. Wham! After exchanging more than 100 blows, White Tiger sent Jaren flying with a well-placed kick. Crash! Slamming to the ground, Jaren coughed up a mouthful of blood. He stared at White Tiger in disbelief. How can someone who looks around the same age as I be so much more powerful? His master once told him that he was the most talented fighter he had ever seen, and estimated that there was nobody else like him in the entire Arudaya. The proof of how wrong his master had been standing right in front of him. Who are you people? Jaren asked in a trembling voice. The members of the Prince gang were absolutely stunned at the turn of events. It was only now did they begin to wonder about Levi and his men's identities. At first, they thought Levi was a weakling they could play with as they pleased. Never did they consider there might be more than meets the eyes with him and his men. Azure Dragon sneered and replied, "You brats are not worthy of knowing our true identities." To Levi and the rest, the members of the Prince gang were no different than children. Lucas, who was still kneeling in the yard, broke into a cold sweat as he recalled how hundreds of men from the Southern Union got down on their knees before Levi. We pissed off someone we shouldn't have. Jaren struggled to his feet, wiping the blood trickling from the corner of his lips. Before stating, "Gentlemen, how about we brush this aside as a misunderstanding and put it all behind us? We'll apologize to you and be done with it." "Who gave you the right to call this a misunderstanding?" Levi answered in a cold tone. The Protector Chapter 792. Jaren and the other members of the Prince gang were frozen to the spot at Levi's words. It was finally sinking in that they were in deep trouble this time. At the rate things were going, they might just end up dying here in South City. This was why they had to resolve this matter as peacefully as possible. Jaren lowered his head slightly in submission, representing the Prince gang's defeat. This was the first time since the founding of the Prince gang that they had actually lost to someone. Every time before, they were always the ones pushing others around and stepping on their defeated enemies. Unfortunately, they had run into someone even more difficult than them this time. Today was a day of utter humiliation for the Prince gang, the very first time they had suffered such a shame. Not only were they disgraced as a group, but it was also a major blow to their individual egos as well. As the head of the Prince gang, Jaren was not a person unwilling to compromise. He planned on appeasing Levi now and then return to Southampton another time to rise up again. Chuckling bitterly, he uttered, "Sir, we were wrong to have provoked you first. We should not have insulted your woman either. But all things can be worked out peacefully. Having a friend is better than making a new enemy." However, the other man's reply was like a brutal slap to the face. Levi scoffed, "Sorry. I'm pretty sure my enemies are numbering in the thousands already. A few more really doesn't make much of a difference. Don't you think you're being a little unreasonable? I'm already putting my pride aside here. Besides, each and every one of us come from an influential family in Southampton. All of us will one day be the heads of our families. Going against us would be going up against all of the prominent families in Southampton," Jaren said arrogantly. His words had the other members of the Prince gang straightening their backs proudly. That was right. They were from the most illustrious families in Southampton. Who dared to offend them? No matter how powerful Levi and his men were, there was no way they would have the courage to go up against the Prince gang. If not out of respect for the members of the gang themselves, then at the very least for the various families they came from. Levi looked amused. So, you have to accord us the right amount of respect. This matter is to be settled pleasantly without any more fuss," Jaren stated with a smile. Despite the calm tone, there was a commanding undercurrent to it with no room for argument. One way or another, the Prince gang would get the respect they thought they deserved. Seeing that Levi did not say anything more, Jaren added, "You're a formidable person in your own right. Isn't it better to have more friends, especially if they're from the wealthiest families in Southampton? You would only benefit from such a relationship. At last, Levi responded, so I'm just supposed to forget that that guy over there insulted my wife and tried to kill me several times? I'm also supposed to disregard the fact that you killed my beloved dog and threatened to massacre a whole block of civilians. Is that what you're saying? That's right. It's all just a huge misunderstanding, no big deal. Jaren smirked. Don't you think you're being rather petty? Aren't they just dogs? What does it matter? And if I insist on pursuing this matter? Levi questioned lowly. Then you make enemies out of all the prominent families in Southampton. A wicked gleam appeared in Jaren's eyes. The Protector Chapter 793. Smack. Levi's hand darted out and he landed a ringing slap on Jaren's face. Then so be it. It might just be a dog to you, but to us, it was a living, breathing creature. It was a precious life. It was our friend, our comrade in arm. Levi roared in rage. He was well and truly mad this time. One of the dogs had been his constant companion when he was still in the military. Playing with it always served to brighten up his day and helped with the stress of fighting a war. They had been on the front lines together and fought plenty of battles. After they retired from the military, he brought it back here with him. Now, Jaren killed his precious dog and had the audacity to say it was just dogs. To me, its life is infinitely more valuable than you scum. His commanding aura exploded around him, exerting immense pressure on everyone present. Being so close to him, Jaren swore the surrounding temperature dropped several degrees, making him shivered. That guy killed so many people ever since he came to South City. Look at the doctor. He was someone who worked hard to save lives. That man saved that jerk, but how did the lunatic repay his kindness? Were all these no big deals to you? What about your intention to slaughter everyone on this street then? Was that a small matter to you too? If we were just some feeble men, we could have been dead by now. Levi's questions slammed into Jaren like bullets, rooting him to the spot. The rest of the Prince gang were pale in their fear. None of them dared to breathe too loudly in case that would focus Levi's ire upon them. A hard glint entered Jaren's eyes and he queried, "Does this mean you won't let us go then? Not even on behalf of the Southampton families? Did you seriously think I would? All of you, kneel!" Levi ordered. White Tiger and the others leaped into action. Within minutes, not a single person was standing before Levi. "You can speak on your knees." Levi looked down at the kneeling Jaren as he said this. How very insulting. This was probably the most humiliating moment Jaren had ever felt in his life. He was the leader of the Prince gang. A prince among princes. Yet here he was kneeling before someone else. This is unacceptable. He bit out through clenched teeth, "You have some guts to do this to us. You're a dead man. Just you wait and see." A cruel smirk curled Levi's lips. "Now, it's time to settle the score with each of you." He headed for Lucas and stopped before the other man. "Since you were lusting after my wife, castrate him." "No." Agonized screams ripped from Lucas' throat and with a gush of blood, he became a eunuch. Next, Levi focused his attention on the members of Prince Gang. "You guys were thinking of killing me, weren't you?" "And no. We weren't," they cried out in protest. "Break their legs. Since their parents won't discipline them properly, I'll do it for them." Another chorus of pain screams rang out while the legs of the members of Prince Gang were systematically broken. It was absolutely terrifying. When Levi fixed his gaze on Jaren, the latter began to panic. What are you going to do to me? The Protector Chapter 794. Levi's eyes flashed and he uttered coldly, breaking an arm for killing my dog isn't excessive, is it? The threat had Jaren's face flushing red in alarm and he struggled to escape. He was a prince. If one of his arms were snapped just like that, his reputation would be ruined forever. He would never be able to look anyone in the eyes again. No, please. Let's talk about this, okay? I'll give you anything you want. He babbled anxiously. At that moment, his disheveled appearance made him look just like any other normal person. Gone were his arrogance and princely demeanor. I want my dog. Eyes wintry with his rage, Levi glared at him. Jaren was stumped at his words. His dog is already dead. How am I supposed to give it back to him? In the next second, there was the metallic glint of a blade swishing down. Jaren's right arm flopped to the ground uselessly. Immediately, blood sprayed forth like a crimson fountain. Ah! His howls of pain mixed with those of Lucas and the rest, echoing in the vast courtyard. Thus, Levi had every single member of the Southampton Prince gang crippled. The only exceptions were the Jones brothers, who had left earlier and were not involved in this incident. This was a stain that could never be erased from the reputation of the prestigious Prince gang. In the blink of an eye, they had fallen from grace. Nobody had expected this. Jaren shrieked, I can promise you that we'll be back for revenge. I'll kill you. I'll kill all your family and friends. I won't stop until every single one of them is dead. Levi smiled grimly and replied, none of you were ever properly disciplined when you were young. All you know how to do is bully the weak and throw your weight around. No crime is too evil for you. All I'm doing is teaching you a lesson on your parents' behalf. But I don't think that's enough. Checking his watch, he continued, before the stroke of midnight tonight, your families are to kneel before me and apologize for your actions. Otherwise, there will be consequences. You. That's just preposterous. How dare you demand that? You really are outrageous. Toss them out of here. Levi dismissed them with a wave of his hand. His men were quick to do as he said. In their current states, the members of the Southampton Prince gang really were a sorry sight. Jaren's face was dark as he snarled, let's get back to Southampton. We have to tell our families about what happened. Whoever was involved in what happened just now needs to die. I'm going to strip his skin from his flesh and drink his blood like it's the most exquisite wine out there. I'll carve his meat from his very bones. When I'm done with him, he'll be begging to die. Get revenge. We must be avenged. The others yelled out in agreement. There were no words to describe the extent of their hatred toward Levi. Meanwhile, back in Southampton, Tyler and Wales were chatting idly. Have you heard from Lucas in the past 2 days? I wonder if he managed to get Zoe and Helena. They had not received any news from the others ever since they returned to Southampton. The Protector Chapter 795. Wales chuckled and answered, this is Lucas we're talking about. Getting a woman for himself is child's play for him. Tyler thought over that and had to agree. Lucas was a domineering person who always did as he pleased in Southampton. Nobody had ever dared to stop him here, so who would have the courage to do so at South City? But then why isn't he back yet? And there's been no news from him either. I tried calling him but strangely enough, his phone is turned off. Being a little more meticulous than his brother, Tyler got the vague feeling that something was about to happen. He's probably having too much fun. I wouldn't mind sleeping with those two. beauties either. Wales commented with a lecherous grin. Furrowing his brows, Tyler mulled over everything that had happened so far. He abruptly suggested, "Do you think he ran into some trouble?" "Why would you say that?" "I heard Jaren and the rest of the Prince gang left Southampton as well, but nobody has any idea where they went. I'm starting to suspect something happened to Lucas and they went to aid him." Tyler mused. His brother patted his shoulder. "Oh, Kman. You're overthinking things. Just think about who is by Zoe's side. It's just Levi. Do you honestly think he can do anything to Lucas? It's not like he'll be able to cripple Lucas of all people." "That's true. Levi is just a useless piece of trash." "What are you two talking about?" Michael's voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Them. Grandpa, we're discussing about Levi," Wales answered. Instantly, Michael's expression darkened. He snapped, "Didn't I say to not mention Levi Garrison again? He's not worthy of our attention." "Grandpa, it's like this." Tyler swiftly informed Michael about the incident with Lucas. When he was done, a smile broke out on the older man's face. "So that's what happened. Levi is doomed now that Lucas has his eyes set on him. In truth, Levi is a loose end of the Jones family that might come back to bite us in the ass in the future. Unfortunately, we can't just get rid of him. This is a wonderful opportunity that we must thank Lucas for." Wales grinned maniacally at his grandfather's words. "That's so true. There's no way Levi will survive a confrontation with Lucas. We won't need to worry about him anymore." Tyler frowned and expressed his concerns, to which his grandfather responded with, "Tyler, you're really overthinking things. Be it another person, Lucas might be in danger. But this is just Levi. I don't think he's even capable of stirring up any trouble, let alone being a threat to Lucas." Michael gave a disdainful snort. Comparing Lucas and Levi was like comparing a kitten to a tiger. The Protector Chapter 796. At one of Southampton's downtown areas. Despite being a downtown area, this particular neighborhood was empty. Not a single soul could be seen within a 10-kilometer radius of it. This strange phenomenon could be attributed to the guards patrolling every single road that led to it, as this area was listed as private property. As for who the property belonged to, it was none other than the most prominent family in Southampton, the royal family of Goel. The Goel family was said to have existed here for nearly 1,000 years, a testament to their prowess. At that moment, there were several people lying on the ground before the gates of the manor. Every single one of them either had their arms or legs broken. One poor soul had obviously been castrated, as blood kept spurting from between his legs. The only thing they had in common was that all of them looked extremely pitiful. Within moments, the doors to the mansion swung open and a large group of people poured out. Among them was an elderly man with snowy white hair holding onto a dragon-headed cane. The old man seemed to be close to 100 years old. While he was not as agile as he used to be, his eyes still shone bright and sharp. The elderly was none other than Zabian Goel, the patriarch of the Goel family. In Southampton, he was respectfully referred to as Elder Goel by everyone else, as he had the final say in most matters. His words were ultimate, deciding the future of the city or the fate of someone. Everyone was both in awe of and fearful of him, thus treating him with the utmost respect. Jaren was his favorite grandson and also the one he was most proud of. He had spent the last 20 years of his life nurturing and grooming his grandson to be his successor. Hence, when he saw that his precious grandson was missing an arm, he exploded. Bang! He slammed his cane down on the floor and the stick of wood instantly splintered. Rayarg! He tossed his head back as he bellowed his fury to the heavens. The rest of the Goel family also cried out in outrage at the mistreatment of one of their own. In Southampton, they were practically gods for all the respect people gave them. Everyone was always bending over backward to serve or please them. In fact, oftentimes whoever spoke to them did so on their knees. They were the most powerful and prominent family in Southampton. The fear everyone felt toward them was so ingrained that many would suffer from insomnia at the mere mention of their names. Some would even instinctively feel the urge to get down on their knees. This led to nobody daring to offend Jaron and his friends, who were the other various young heirs to the prominent families. What nobody had expected was that someone would be so bold as to chop off the prince's arm. Despite losing an arm, amusement danced on Jaron's face. Unfortunately, we met an incredibly powerful opponent this time. I killed his dog and he cut off my arm in revenge. He also crippled every single one of us from the prince gang. Not only that, but he's also saying that our parents have to go to him before midnight today and kneel as you apologize. Who did this? Zabian roared. The Protector Chapter 797. Silence followed the patriarch's question. None of the other family members had ever seen the old man so enraged. Oh no, Elder Goel is utterly infuriated this time. A man from South City called Levi Garrison. He has several expert fighters with him. I wasn't a match for his strongest. Jaron explained. By the way, Elder Goel, they seem to be related to the Southern Union. We personally witnessed as the members of the Southern Union kneeled before him. One of the Prince gang members chimed in. So what if they're connected to the Southern Union? As if I'm afraid of them. I don't care who he is, I'll kill him even if he's from Oakland City. Zabian's eyes gleamed menacingly as he ordered, contact all the other families involved in this incident. Tell them to gather here right away. Tonight, I shall personally lead them to South City. I would like to see who in that damn city dares to accept an apology from me. Everybody present was astounded at his words. They had not thought a day would come where Zabian would go to such a small city as South City himself. In no time at all, the patriarch of the second royal family of Southampton, Mario Hunt, arrived. He was incensed when he found out his grandson, Jackson, had been crippled. The patriarch of the Quinn family, Hayden Quinn, was even more furious. His dear grandson had been castrated like some animal. That was just unacceptable. A short while later, the various heads of families were all present. Of the top 30 prestigious families in Southampton, the only family not here was the Joneses. Remember, this matter involves our reputations. We must keep a low profile for now. Whatever else can wait till after we deal with these barbarians at South City. Zabian ordered firmly. As expected, everyone immediately agreed with his plan. With that, the 29 families headed for South City together. Since they had to keep a low profile, they did not bring many men with them. However, those they brought were the best fighters they had. This group of top fighters in Southampton was more than enough to destroy the Southern Union several times over. At the Guardian Mansion of South City, Levi was watching as Azure Dragon and the others repaired the walls. His face was twisted in an annoyed expression as he muttered angrily, "This is the second time these walls have been destroyed. Next time, I'll shove a cannon up the ass of whoever wrecks them." Kieran piped up cheerfully, "Sir, that might happen a lot sooner than you think. Maybe even tonight. I'm pretty sure those brats have gone back to call for reinforcements." "I'll be waiting," was the bored reply from Levi as he put the matter out of his mind. Right then, several people appeared in the courtyard. He recognized Mike, the commander-in-chief of the South City War Zone, and Percy, the commander-in-chief of the Northampton War Zone. However, the other 6 were unknown to him. The 8 men came to a stop before Levi and saluted him. "Good day, Chief." Smiling, Percy spoke up, "Sir, the 8 Warzonies are considering a joint exercise sometime soon. These men are the commanders-in-chief of the other 6 Warzonies." The Protector Chapter 798. This is the Commander-in-Chief of the Southampton War Zone, Clark Pond. "Hello Chief. It is such an honor to meet you," Clark said excitedly. The Southampton War Zone was a very important area. From the military viewpoint, it was more important than both the Northampton and South City War Zonies. Correspondingly, Clark's position was more important than Mike's and Percy's. Levi smiled, "I've heard of you." Clark was surprised that the god of war actually remembered him. This was an honor of a lifetime for him. Percy began introducing the others. "This is the Commander-in-Chief of Haven War Zone, Zayden Fairfield. Chillshire War Zone, Weston Zink. South Lake War Zone, Stanley Hodge. Here, Darren Maxon from the North Lake War Zone. And lastly, Zayden Ziegler from the Westview War Zone." Levi shook hands with the other 5. This made them so excited and emotional. As if they had just met their idol. They were completely caught by surprise. Little did they expect that the legendary god of war himself would be so approachable and down to earth. "Chief, what happened to these walls and floors here?" Clark asked curiously. "Nothing much, someone pummeled them," Levi said. "What? Someone fought in here?" Clark and the other leaders had to take a deep breath. Firstly, they were surprised that there were people who dared to fight in there. Secondly, to create such damage, the person must be a master. No big deal, they are just a bunch of kids. Their parents are coming tonight to apologize. Levi smiled. In his eyes, the Prince gang was really but a bunch of kids. His experience in the past 6 years was more than what many people had experienced in 60 years. The man was way too mature, much like an old bogeyman. "It's good to know that they are coming here to apologize. Silly of me to think that someone have the audacity to offend you, Chief." Clark and the rest laughed as they followed Levi into the house. Very soon, the 8 Warzonies were about to launch their joint exercise. They wanted Levi to give some suggestions, as their main objective was to pay tribute to him. Edinburgh Manor, Southampton. Michael called for Tyler and Wales. "Something might happen soon," Michael said. "Oh? What's going on?" Both of them looked at their grandfather curiously. "I have just received the news that Elder Goel has left Southampton. No one knows where he has gone to," Michael said. "What? How is that possible? The man has not left Southampton for the past 50 years, hasn't he?" Tyler was extremely shocked. For Zabian Goel to leave Southampton meant that something colossal was about to happen. He had not gone anywhere for decades. Tyler said, "Could Lucas Matter have to do with it?" The Protector Chapter 799. "That's impossible. After all, it's just 2 women. What could have happened from there? Moreover, who else in the South City would dare to do something to Lucas? Let alone make Elder Goel to leave this city for him." Michael and Wales exchanged glances. They were still very certain that Lucas was fine, and that Levi was unable to cause any ripples. "Tyler, you are overthinking this. Think about it, what waves could Levi possibly cause?" Michael could not help but say. "Grandpa, why don't I make a trip to South City to see what's going on?" Tyler suggested. "All right, go and take a look so that we can all be more at ease." In case anything happens, we can get the first-hand information. The older man nodded in agreement. As he helmed the large family, he was full of strategies. At the other side, Yadriel Larson reported the incident to Grover. What? I guess Zabian Goel will definitely be coming to South City to seek trouble then. The master was surprised. That's right, he might have arrived by now. Yadriel said anxiously. That won't do. I'll go and stop him. Zabian's troops had already surreptitiously infiltrated South City. However, they were stopped the moment they entered the city. Just when they were about to bristle with rage, they recognized Grover. What are you doing here, Grover? Zabian asked coldly. Go back now. You're going to get into deep trouble. Grover advised him. Ha! I know you are related to that person. However, no matter what background he has, I will get him. Zabian could not listen to anything at all. Say no more. The decision was made that moment I stepped out of South Hampton. His attitude was more determined than ever before. Grover could not persuade him at all and had no choice but to return. Very quickly, Zabian brought his group to a mysterious neighborhood. This particular lane was very quiet and sparsely populated. It was easy to do things in quiet places like this. No one would know even if something big happened. Woof woof woof. The dog barking in the Guardian mansion alerted Levi and his group. Our guests have arrived. Levi smiled. Chief, do you mind if we go and see who this person is? He sure has the guts to beard the lion in his den. Clark and the rest were very curious. Who could actually behave so atrociously? Before Levi and made the Guardian mansion such a horrific state? Not at all. Who knows, he could be someone you know. Levi smiled. Clark and the rest followed behind him. Going out the door, they saw that the entrance was full with people and each of them had great temperament. Clearly, they were the masters of the masters. They were definitely stronger than those from the Prince gang. The Protector Chapter 800. Grandpa, it's them. They are strong. The one standing in the middle leads them. Jaren pointed Levi out. However, he did not expect to see another 8 strangers to turn up out of nowhere. But he did not care. With his grandpa here, even another 800 people would have been useless. Upon seeing Levi and his men, the leaders of the 29 top families in Southampton fixated their gaze on their enemies. They could barely wait to swallow them alive. How dare somebody crippled their precious child? Zabian suppressed his anger forcefully and asked coldly, was it you who chopped off my grandson's arm? Indeed, it was me. He killed my dog and all I did was breaking one of his hands. That was already very merciful of me. Levi said calmly. Are you telling me you could have killed my grandson just because of a dog? Zabian could not be more infuriated. Jaren, the most noble young talent of Southampton, was being compared to a dog? How could he take this lying down? The key was that his grandson's arm was chopped off because of a dog. That's right, an eye for an eye, which is very fair. However, I spared your grandson's life. Perhaps the entire Goel family should be thanking me instead. That line startled everyone. All of them fell silent and stared at him in complete disbelief. How can he say something like that? The Goel family has to thank him. This was unthinkable for each of the prominent families from Southampton. The men on the other side were clearly declaring war to the first family of South Hampton, the Goel family. Great! You are very courageous. No wonder my grandson lost to you. Instead of angry, Zabian laughed out loud instead. Did you castrate Lucas Quinn as well? The patriarch continued asking. Yep. Since he had no control over the lower part of his body, I took over the control. Indifferently, Levi replied. So, you crippled the entire prince gang? Zabian narrowed his eyes. Yes, I did. Since their parents did not teach them properly, I did all of you a favor. And taught them a lesson. Levi's eyes stared directly at Zabian as well. Excellent, we all heard it. He has admitted to all the crimes. Zabian told the other people. Everyone shouted out loud. An eye for an eye. Revenge. Revenge. Levi's voice popped up. Aren't you here to apologize? Zabian was taken aback. Before I released them, I told them to get their parents here to kneel and apologize. Levi retorted sharply, parents should bear the burden for their children's sins. Don't you agree? All the leaders were taken aback. He was actually provoking them now.